T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 12 of Kush'S Korner here on the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Tonight, we have on TJay Chambers of Chambers Serpents, talk about a lot of different topics, but one in particular being scrub pythons, a passion that we both share. He recently just got a clutch of barneck scrub pythons. We'll get into all of that here very shortly. Before that, as always, USARC. For anybody who is not aware, USARC is the organization that is fighting for our rights to keep our reptiles, to run our reptile businesses, and to pursue this way of life. Check out usarc.org to learn everything you need to know about USARC. And if you are not already, become a member. As a community, we have strength in numbers. So the more people we have behind the cause that is fighting for our rights, the better. We are brought to you tonight by Blake's Exotic Feeders. If you are in the market for quail, check out Blake's Exotic Feeders. They hand raise everything right here in the United States, so you know you're getting high quality animals from a quality source. We're also brought to you by Juggernaut Reptiles. For anybody who's in the blood short tail game, ball pythons, anacondas, a number of other species that they work with, check out Juggernaut Reptiles on all forms of social media. They really are producing some of the highest end examples of the species they work with. And we were also brought to you by Mark Bailey Reptiles. Mark Bailey is one of the OGs of the ball python industry, doing this long before I was alive, and all around just one of the best people in the industry, one of my favorites. So for some of the nicest high-end ball pythons in the industry, check out Mark Bailey Reptiles on MORPH Market and social media. All right, guys, here we are. And the chat is already blowing up. We got 1776 Exotics. What's up? Chantel, how's it going? Alex Oliver in the building. We got Revision Reptiles here. What's going on? We got a lot of people. I mean, I'm very thankful. Lisa's here as always. Thank you for showing up. But I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get TJay on the show. Dude, how's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Dude, I'm doing really good, man. So you got a really beautiful room over there, man.
Oh, thank you.
Pretty awesome setup. So for anyone who isn't familiar with you, kind of what are you up to? What's who are you in the industry? How's where you are today?
Well, right now I currently keep a lot of carpet pythons, scrub pythons. I've actually got a kind of diverse collection of like that type of snake. I would say like kind of arboreal, semi-arboreal. I've got Amazon tree boas. Just recently got a chondro. I've got Jamaican boas, Cuban boas, boa morph combo stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I've even got hognose.
Oh, yeah.
I've never posted them before, but I do have hognose snakes. But yeah, I have a long history of keeping reptiles. I've been in and out of the industry a few times. It all started when I was really young, keeping I would go out and like catch frogs, bring them home, and just watch them jump out of the pond in my front yard and leave forever. But that slowly turned into keeping some lizards. My mom was really supportive of the thing growing up, and eventually hit an Amazon tree boa for my first snake, and that just kind of switched everything. That kind of switched everything for me and made me just fall in love with keeping snakes and like this type of snake, something that's a little more aggressive and things like that.
That's an interesting first snake. I heard that one before, of Amazon tree boa.
Yeah. What got me into snakes is actually a white lip python. My older sister dated a guy who had huge reptile room, and he had a white lip python, and I had never seen anything like that. And it would bite me every single time I held it, but I didn't care. So I just wanted to look for snakes like that, but I could not find a white lip in those days. So I settled for what I thought was the next coolest thing, was an Amazon tree boa. And then that eventually landed me in scrub pythons, which I got into kind of accidentally.
Okay.
I've shared this story on a podcast before, but so I'll kind of keep it brief. But I traded an enclosure that I had built. I actually build pretty much all my own cages.
Okay. Cool.
I traded it for on Craigslist for a guy who had a scrub python. He hit me up and asked if I would trade, and I was like, never heard of a scrub python, but sure, let's do it. So I get there, and he had an 11-foot southern and a 40-gallon breeder mesh top, and the snake's face was mangled.
Holy
and I
shit.
and it was so mean, and I felt so bad for the snake. I was like, give me this snake, get me out of here. I didn't know the snake was going to be 11 feet long, so I brought a box that was literally the size of like a 15-quart tub, and we got that snake in that tub.
Oh my God.
It busted out on the drive, which was awesome. But I got that snake home and didn't know what I was doing. And because I was keeping carpets at the time. I had Brettles, pythons, but I wasn't ready for an 11-foot scrub. And this thing was just nasty. So that's when I discovered Morelia Python forums. Okay. And that was a real eye-opener for me. But in those days, I came across a guy named Evan Arambul. I believe right now he goes by Dr. Arroyo on Instagram. He hit me up, and he kind of gave me some advice on how to care for this thing and what I can do to manage it. Kind of showed me how to use shift tubs and stuff like that, and hide with a lid and a hole so you can pull the snake out to work it, and just kind of told me a lot of the basics online. And then I got to meet this guy, and he took me herping. My very first time herping with him, we found clobber eye. Next day was Willard eye, and wow. I was just like, I was hooked at that point. And so I moved down to Sierra Vista to live with him, and took my snake collection. And he had just recently, at that time, this was like 2013. Okay. He had just bought David Mean's collection of scrubs and David Prada's collection of scrubs. Okay. So this this apartment was a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 snake rooms, and us sleeping on the floor and the couch in the living room, and herping every day. Like it was so much fun. But I learned a lot about snakes and about scrub pythons in particular in that time. Sure. And Evan was just like a wealth of knowledge with all that stuff. And he had actually gone to Australia and found king horneye in the wild. And so I kind of got taken under the wing of someone who really, I didn't know at the time, but he was really going to set the tone of like my snake keeping for probably forever. And in that time, there was one snake that changed the game. And it was the first time I walked into Evan's house, and he had this 8-foot vision, and he had rain in that cage.
I was pretty sure I knew you were going there.
Dude, that snake was mind-blowing. Just like, he would curl up in a ball like this big, just in the front of his cage, and just look out at the glass at you. And I just remember I would go in there at night. I think it would piss Evan off, but I would just go in there and fucking stare at that snake with a flashlight and just like look at him. I couldn't stay out of that snake room. That snake was just mesmerizing. And he was kind of workable until he didn't want to be worked. And then he would just apparently he got named he was named Rain because he could like dominate whatever situation he was in. And it was like absolutely true. Like he would handle shit for a little bit, but once he was over it, it was over, and it's gonna be a huge ordeal. And he would become like flighty and bitey. And one time he bit a towel, and wrapped it up, and we had to spend like an hour pulling a towel out of no joke, like a 15 foot scrub's mouth for yeah. But anyways, little rant there, but that snake was just like a game changer for me, and it just really set in stone, like that's the most badass I think a snake can get, is a big bar neck like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, kind of as I dipped out of snakes for a little bit, and then I jumped back in a little bit later, I knew I wanted to build a collection of scrubs. I managed to get my hands on a few, like maybe a dozen or so, before COVID prices really started hitting, and then I kind of pumped the brakes for a little bit.
Yeah, so
yeah, and I haven't really bought a scrub in several years, so I've got I need a couple. I did lose a couple along the way, like males that I have 2 adult female Wamina Jaya type that I have no male for, that have just been sitting there for a couple years now, which is a bummer. But yeah, luckily got some bar neck eggs this year.
Yeah. I'm going to try to do something real quick. This is very impromptu and quite unprofessional, but I feel like the rain topic is one to not be glossed over, because that, I mean,
okay, hell yeah, agree.
Well, like that snake, like you said, he was fucking massive, right?
Yeah, and his clutch mate was named Ascadelia, and looked completely different. Looked like your basic sarong bar neck, like really heavily patterned, dark. But she was bigger than him.
Really?
Yep.
Holy shit.
She was a monster.
Like over 15 feet type of monster?
We're pretty sure. Yeah. I mean, it was super hard, but I mean, I've got a 12-foot, or she's like right under 12-foot Apodora. And she is not as big as those snakes were. Nowhere near. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw this up for anyone who's watching. This is the snake we're talking about, and this is many people who know about scrub pythons will say this is the nicest bar neck who ever lived, and
they're right.
And I was gonna say it's really hard to debate that. Just the only thing that I could say that I think would make this snake nicer, and then this is reaching, because this snake is almost perfect, is if that base color was more gold. But as from like a clean bar neck, I don't think you can beat this. That bright tail, and I mean, like, there's no muddiness in those bands whatsoever. Just crisp, clean. Like that snake is basically perfect.
Yeah. He was fucking cool. He was really awesome. And he had a cool story too. Like, he came from I think the Barkers produced him.
Yes.
And he switched hands several times. And, I mean, you have Rain offspring, right?
I have a daughter of his and then 2 grandchildren. So a pair of grandchildren and then a daughter who's the mom of those babies.
Yeah. See, that is super cool. Like, at least if we were going to establish a lineage of any scrub, it's really good that we did with that one.
Yes, absolutely. There's that, and then some of the Prada stuff.
Yeah,
I have a female Prada line who I adore that snake, and then obviously Janet, Rob Christian's snake is Prada line.
A lot of dark in the Prada stuff.
Yes,
like really, really crazy melanistic looking type of stuff a lot of times.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll try to do Bush League photo number 2 where I email a picture to myself mid-show, because I'm not prepared for this. But
no, it's important to do.
But I mean, this is something that I mean, we'll get to your clutch here shortly. But something that is a really, it's a cool opportunity for us, is that this is kind of, scrub pythons have been bred for a couple of decades now, but I feel like this is still we're in the infancy of this market.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you don't have like hardly any established F2s or F3s out there. Like we've barely even hit any of those, right? Like, is there F3 bar necks now?
There's one single F3 bar neck that I believe Chris Foley still has. That I mean, it's a stunning snake. But yeah, there was a clutch that only one baby hatched out from, and he still has that snake, I believe.
Okay.
And then there's a handful of F2s. I mean, my two Rain offspring are. Well, I mean, I think actually the mom and the babies are F2 because they were outcrossed to a wild caught male.
Okay.
The daughter's babies. So yeah, there are F2s, and then there are the F2 kind of granity southern.
That's right.
Animals that Patrick Holmes acquired a few years ago. I have some of those. He has some. Calvin Garcia has a female. This is my Prada line female. So
Yeah.
if you look at that animal and then Rain side by side, you know, they're almost kind of like the inverse of each other.
Yeah, exactly. She's got like the dark base color. It looks like on her tail and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And what I love about some of the Prada stuff, and I believe that Rob's animals have this too, is that like black bleeding through on the head scales.
Yeah.
Because that's a look you don't see in very many bar necks.
Right. It's like someone tried to spray paint the bars on there, and so it's like a little sloppy. It kind of bleeds in. Yeah. It looks really cool.
Yeah. No, I love that snake. And then for comparison, literally, it's almost like you take that snake and just
flip it,
hit the reverse on it, and yeah. But anyway, so yeah, man. This year was a month ago at this point. When did that clutch hit the ground for you?
Yeah, it was like the 17th, 18th of April. It was like a week after my daughter was born. And so it really takes a lot of the excitement out of a barnet clutch to produce a human offspring just a week prior.
It takes a lot of the excitement out of having a kid.
Oh, no. It's just like I was still riding that high of everything that happened, and I'm a dad now. It's like, oh yeah, and then I've got snakes, and oh, there's eggs in here, and like it definitely didn't hit me like it would have last year if I would have gotten this clutch. But I'm super thankful. I mean, I've been in love with this species for a long time, so to be able to get to this point was really nice.
Yeah,
glad I hit it.
Kind of the journey of everything with bar necks that got you to this point of having a clutch in the incubator.
Well, I mean, the way I keep I guess we can talk about how I keep my collection, and that'll kind of all play into everything. Sure. So I'm like an ambient keeper. I don't have a hot spot really on anything. I've got some like light bulbs, like really low LED lights inside of cages, but nothing that I would consider like a real hot spot. Even though during like the cooling periods, sometimes I'll have carpets wrap up around the light shroud, like the guard around the light bulb, trying to get some heat. But yeah, I tried to run hot spots at one point, and at certain times a year, I found myself just constantly trying to chase a desired temperature inside the enclosure, because the temperatures outside get almost 120 degrees here. And so most people keep their houses at like 80 degrees most of the summer, or 82 degrees is like what you'll set your thermostat to. And so it's kind of a different way of living in general, where but when you go from 118 degrees outside into a 72 degrees house, it's like uncomfortably cold. And so that yeah, and so my house is kept kind of warm, and during the summer specifically, and I just got too much heat inside of cages every time I was running a hot spot, just because of the fluctuation in the room. So I started taking a little more control in just my ambience. And even with that, because now I'm in an outbuilding in my backyard where I built up this new building last year. Even with that, it's my ambience will still get into the 90s. And it does that during the heat peak time of the day, but it'll drop down to 80 to 78 maybe at night.
Okay.
But they won't stay like that. But I haven't had any issues with snakes getting to really hot ambience for a very short amount of time, because it really just rides the scale up and then back down. It's not like it's boom, heat is on, we're going. It kind of rises naturally, and I've got windows in here that kind of provide a good light cycle. So
okay,
the lights inside of my cages are just for me. Like when I'm in the snake room, I keep them off all the time if I'm not in here. So I don't really do any purposeful light cycling, but in Arizona we have like really long days during the summer, and we have really short daylight days during the winter, and so they get a forced pretty extreme light cycle throughout the year. And then my collection gets a natural, like, okay, it's hot during the summer, and that's when I usually cut off food too, so I don't feed a good portion of my collection during the summer.
Okay.
And a lot of that is because I also breed rodents. I've got a rodent building, and my production goes down during the summer quite a bit. And I also try to thin down my rodent colonies a lot. So if like during the winter, I can run really heavy amounts of rats in tubs, and they'll keep each other warm and everything like that. But during the summer, you got to really thin it down. And so the production definitely slows down, but that works because I don't really want to feed my collection during the summer. That's like my time. In my opinion, it's good to let them kind of clean out and have that boom and bust food cycle.
Sure.
So a good portion of my stuff gets turned back onto food in like September, and
Okay.
I'll feed really heavy. And I will even feed really big meals, which some people say you can't do when you keep ambient, but no, you can. I've fed some big meals where I thought I screwed up. I was like, oh God, like I'm going to be seeing this rat again here in a couple days. But no, they manage it pretty well. And I think maybe it's just because I raised a lot of these snakes in this type of environment, I guess, especially like all my carpet pythons. I bought a good portion of them as babies and raised them up in here, or in my house, which does the same type of thing in the room that they were in. But yeah, so with the Indonesian stuff, like the scrubs this year, I continue to feed throughout the winter, and I do kind of like, I guess, medium-ish, maybe small meals for them when the fall starts, and I'll taper it down just a little bit, but I kind of feed everything weekly from like fall until they ovulate, hopefully.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. And I did that with my Apodora last year, or I guess the 2023 season, not this, whatever. The last, yeah. And I got a clutch. They were infertile, but I got her to ovulate. And I think what a lot of people run into, it's just my opinion on that first experience, but also what I experienced with this, when it comes to breeding a lot of these like Indo species, it seems, and especially with the Apodora, it seems like a lot of people get them building, and then they'll go off food and not ovulate. It seems like you have to get them before they decide to go off food. You've got to really hit them with like absurdly big meals. That's just like what worked for me. Like I was feeding like 2 jumbo rats to her a week, and then one week I fed her 3. And
oh wow.
But she's a big snake.
Sure.
And you can hardly see 2 jumbo rats inside her. It's not like it leaves a lump, it just makes it look kind of chunky. Yeah. But I think that people run into the thing where the snake will decide to go off food before it actually got to that caloric amount where it needed to ovulate. And because I've heard of it so much with Apodora, and then the people that I heard get some success with it, they say that like that boom kind of meal is what forces them to ovulate. And I've heard it with like emerald tree boas, and I've heard a lot of species do that, but for some reason Apodora will just go off food kind of early, and they'll keep inverting. They'll lay inverted for months.
Interesting.
And yeah, and so they really trick you, where any other snake you'd be like, oh, I got a clutch coming, hell yeah. When like my scrub, my bar neck, she didn't invert at all. But I would come in here.
Yeah, I don't see that out of my.
No,
I don't see that behavior.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times in carpets, but the Apodora, like as soon as she started building follicles, she would just completely roll herself upside down. Riley's posted pictures of his female doing it. You'll see a lot of people posting that photo of them flipped over, but it seems like where a lot of people don't get the success of ovulation is like they weren't able to get that extra meal in there, that extra big amount of calories, and they're like, nah, I decided no more food, and no, I didn't get enough. It's kind of like how I see it. I don't know if that's true or if I'm just bullshitting, but that's what I try to do. And I did that with my scrub this year, where when after I saw Locks, I gave her a couple really big meals.
Okay.
And then I saw an ovulation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that holds true for a lot of different pythons in particular. You know, I've seen success with scrub pythons with doing that, with hitting them with really big meals, and I think with like white lip pythons, I've heard of the same thing. Retics, I mean, that's how people breed retics, is they just feed the absolute shit out of them, and you know,
seems to work for them.
Yeah, you know, there's enough retics in this world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there is definitely an issue across the hobby with pythons of underfeeding. And I think that's why there's been a lot of close but no cigar kind of breeding experiences. I think that plagued scrub pythons for a long time. Why, you know, people would amass these good sized collections and, you know, maybe have a clutch every other year when they're breeding 10 females.
Yeah. It's the overcorrection thing that humans just love to do. They hear that we're doing too much of something. They're like, we're never doing it again. And they just completely revert and do the opposite. And I mean, I think it's a big thing in carpet pythons too. Because if you see my snakes at the beginning of breeding season, when I've got them all primed up, they look fat. They're like, but with my carpets, I don't do what I do with the endo stuff. I feed them really hard and then I cut them off. And they don't need meals throughout the breeding season. I actually fed the one female I tried feeding throughout the season this year didn't go for me, and every other one did. I don't know if that was a huge contributor, but it was just anecdotal for me. But I've had no problem breeding carpets, just feeding them none in summer, a lot in the fall, none in the winter, a lot in the spring, like just to get them back up to size after a whole lot of breeding, laying eggs, doing whatever. But that, for me, that formula seems to work in this room, in the environment that I'm in. And so the carpets run pretty good for me, other than weird genetic things, I think. With like genes and morphs and, you know, stuff like that. I mean, should we talk about carpets now? I kind of go on rants a little.
The floor is yours. Let's go. I love when the conversations flow freely like this.
Okay, yeah. So last year I tried breeding a 2013 granite female to a 2013 het granite female. She's a West Papuan het granite.
Okay.
And then I have a male 2013 granite jag. And I bred them together, all slugs. And when I listened to a lot of people talk about the granite stuff, the early stuff was super inbred. And they would come out deformed, no eyes, or in the beginning, they couldn't even get viable clutches once they came to the States.
I've heard all this stuff.
Yeah. So I think that female is just from those early days. And I tried breeding this year a 2020 granite to her, and a good portion of the clutch went bad. Okay. And every one that survived was deformed, whether it was kinked, no eyes. The one that did is like good to go ish is really neuro, like a jag, and and has no pupil. It has like an outline of a pupil, but it's not filled in with black. And so I'm guessing it's blind too.
Probably. That's interesting.
Yeah, really weird. But that's the kind of stuff and also with zebras this year, I've got a lot of kinked animals.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had 2 die in the egg that were pretty kinked up. And then a third one was alive and severely kinked and ended up dying like a day after I had to get it out of the egg. And then one is alive and doing fine, but really kinked. And it's all zebras. And so, yeah, I don't know if there's... I mean, we know there's definitely something with the super zebra that what it does is it fuses. There's a guy in Australia that did a bunch of x-rays on his super zebras, and I'm sure you've heard of the kinked tail.
Yes.
So apparently that is spinal fusion happening down there, where it just, their vertebrae are fused.
Interesting.
And so the fact that I saw a bunch of kinked stuff in just zebras, no super zebras, makes me kind of think that there might be a little bit of something with that gene, because I mean, I've hatched out a bunch of albinos, a bunch of Darwin carpets, and I've never had a kinked baby. Yeah. And it was just kind of weird. So I've heard people talk about it in the past, and I know that the super zebra is a thing, but kind of makes me think that there might be something going on with zebra, because you would think that we would see a lot more zebras and a lot more super zebras with how long that gene has been out there. But not that they're like a rare thing or anything, but I don't think that they're as common as like a caramel. Like you can see caramels all the time. Caramels are everywhere in the carpet world. Yeah. And it's an incomplete dominant trait, just like zebra. And yeah, so I think that maybe there's a little something going on. Maybe they're dying in the eggs, and some people are like, just kind of bad luck sometimes. But I don't know. It's kind of something that I've been assessing on how I want to approach my breeding, on like trying to really outcross stuff, anything that's granite, not breed it to anything that has granite or het granite in it. Yeah. Because it's a whole lot of work on a female to pump out just a couple deformed babies. And so yeah, that's kind of been lately my carpet thoughts as far as like my productions this year. I still have a lot of eggs in the incubator, but and the clutches, I mean, the clutches were like 15, and so I had like 4 or 5 bad ones, so I still had like 10 good and like 7 zebras that are good. But the fact that every one that was kinked was a zebra was just a little concerning to me. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know totally what's going on with that, but I'm going to try to just outcross stuff a little bit more and try to breed things that aren't related. But it gets pretty tricky in carpet pythons, being that real limited gene pool. So yeah, we'll see how things go with things like that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's too much of a reach, considering that, for one, the homozygous form does have a genetic deficiency, whatever you want to call it. And it could be a thing where this has been happening and just no one really talks about it.
I fear that there's a lot of that kind of stuff that probably is happening. And so that's why I'm trying to put this out there. Maybe other people, I have heard people talk about like, hey, I'm having real bad luck with zebra stuff. Like when they were trying to make like zebra snow combos or whatever, they were having difficult with the zebras just making it out of the egg sometimes. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's hard to say.
and that also just makes sense considering that you're just constantly narrowing the gene pool at least a little bit at a time. Do you know if the original zebras that were in Australia were always having related problems, even like decades ago?
I don't know actually, and I'm not even too sure because some of the morphs were like found in people's personal collections like outside of Australia too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so sometimes things just popped up.
Sure.
Like I think we got stonewashed before Australia.
No shit.
I think I could be wrong on that, but people in Australia are just now posting stonewash stuff. Like,
I wonder how they got them.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of weird stuff with the carpet morphs, and a lot of it is a gray area. And I don't know, the community is a little bit hard to navigate sometimes, because I feel like there is a lot of gray area with lineage and stuff like that. And people in carpets, I think, hold a lot of value in what they consider a pure lineage, where what I like about like the chondro world is it's just keeping track of lineage. It's not like making sure, like we didn't track it to make sure it's a pure animal. It's just tracking things down the road, and I think that's the right way to do it. And in the carpet python world, you get people that are just really hard on one side of the fence, and I mean you do get that in chondros. However, I feel like in chondros there's a pretty good balance of like the designer guys and then the purists, and I think that's how it should be, because that's how I keep my collection. Like I have pure stuff. I'm not going to breed a carpet to a scrub. I'm not going to breed even scrubs that aren't the same locality together. Not that I have an issue with that, but it's just not what I want to do with my scrub pythons.
Yeah.
And with chondros, I'm just now trying to get into chondros a little bit. I plan on doing just pure chondros, like starting with wild types and just doing that. Because that's how I did the scrub thing. I just like that. It feels cool to start your own line, I guess, with wild caught stuff, and to establish animals that that were pulled out of the wild and a lot of times don't make it. It's a real good feeling to be like, I got one to do it. Like, I got eggs out of a wild caught scrub, which was what some people would say was like nearly impossible years ago. Sure. And now we know that's a bunch of bullshit, and wild caught scrubs will breed just fine. But yeah, I don't know. I sit so equally in both camps of being like, yeah, let's make a really cool looking snake. And, oh, that's a pure lineage snake. That's also really cool. Like I just think it's all cool. And I even think ball pythons are cool. I even think that I kind of like listening to the ball python community. I like listening to their podcasts and like listening to the big breeders talk, because regardless of what you think about what they're doing, their ability to manage and keep track and delegate and focus projects to the long term is, you get a lot of it in the ball python world. And it's cool to watch, like, okay, you can take those business models or whatever, not necessarily on how to make money or get rich, but just as far as like building a system for your snakes. And ball python guys have got a system down. And if you want to keep a big collection of snakes, being able to do it efficiently and keep a lot of them healthy and whatnot, I just like, I like all aspects of snakes. It's really hard for me to talk shit about a certain aspect of any sector of the hobby, I guess. Because I think that people in someone I shamefully just recently came across, and it was because of this channel, is Brian, or is it SUNDOWN Reptiles? Wow, that guy, watching that collection walkthrough was pretty unbelievable. to see someone doing something at that scale, looking that good, like that was really eye-opening for me, and it was really cool. But sorry, a little rant right there.
Oh, no, for sure. And I agree. I think I always say that he kind of, to me, like, he's one of the best examples of like what I feel like professional reptile breeders will look like going forward.
Hell yeah, I agree.
Because I think there's, I mean, this isn't a hot take. There's so much room in the industry for people to do something different. You know, ball pythons are ball pythons. I don't understand how people still sell crested geckos. Like, you know, these things, they're established. They are what they are. But I mean, I feel like variety is just becoming a lot more popular these days. And, you know, someone like Brian, like his business model is rare geckos and tree monitors for the most part. You know, those aren't like highly commercially viable species. You wouldn't think so, but he did that with it. So obviously something went right. You know?
Yeah, it just takes the right person can make any species like look like it's amazing to keep and get people excited about it. And like, just that guy just had to walk around his facility, and I was like, how do I get tree monitors? Like, just the look of everything. I loved how his cages were set up, and then I mean, he even had chondros. It was just it's cool to see guys doing stuff like that. And I mean, another guy that I really look up to, I don't think I've ever really talked to him, is Ryan Young. He's another guy that he's got just the mixed bag of species. The only time I've ever hit up Ryan Young was to ask him for like, it's like a stupid question, and he always takes his time out of his day to message back, and he's always super respectful. So I'll say huge shout out to Ryan Young. I've never bought a snake from him, and he's helped me on anytime I've asked. He's definitely a good dude. Put him in the good book category. Yeah. I'm sure everybody knows that. I've never heard anyone say something bad about Ryan Young.
Yeah, no, I have. The thing is, that's like what you said right there. I think that's possibly the most important part of being a successful, you know, full-time, like he is breeder these days, or even not full-time, but just successful, is not having a reservation about sharing information or information at a price. Like, I don't know, the way that I look at it, that can only benefit you in the long run. You know, someone who, hey, I got a carpet python from so-and-so, I have this question. It's like, well, why don't you go ask him? That could be your answer. Or take the same amount of time to answer the question. And then maybe in 2 years, that person buys a snake from you.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the ROI on that one message? And not that this is only a business thing, but if you want to look at it from dollars and cents, like the people do who don't like to help people, the ROI from that one message could be $1,500.
Yeah, because it can make or break where someone ever spends money with you, or whether they tell their friends not to spend money with you, or tell all their friends to go buy snakes from Ryan Young, because I mean, he's great to work with. Every snake that he sells, people seem to have good luck with them. And so, like, I think how he acts and portrays himself is like what people should aspire to do. He's very level-headed. I love listening to him talk. Even when it comes to the red versus yellow Neo stuff, I know a lot of that is kind of joking, but he even is pretty level-headed about that. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting hobby for sure.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, we got to do what we can to, you know, emphasize people who we all think are doing it right, and, you know, and lead by example ourselves, and just to, you know, be that person who you would have wanted to message when you were brand new. Because I certainly have people who, you know, I looked up to, whether it was because of podcast appearances or, you know, whatever it might be, and or, you know, social media, YouTube, whatever. But then you actually interact with this person, you're like, oh wow, you're an asshole. Like, not only is it like, why are you such a dick? Now I went from high opinion of you to like that fall is even worse than just being an asshole to begin with.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It 100% is. But it makes you really thankful when you come across good people in the industry, especially like I've been burnt a few times in the past. And so when I come across good people, I'm like, yes, like cool. And I mean, I'll admit I'm not the best at communicating online with people. Like I just don't do it a lot of times. Like I'm kind of bad about my phone and stuff. But I definitely try whenever people ask me questions. Like I love talking snakes, but sometimes I get a little bit of weird phone anxiety, I guess. I have like over 200 unread texts right now. Yeah, like it's kind of bad. Yeah. So if you've ever hit me up on Instagram or anything like that, and we shared a couple messages, and then I just never opened your message again, I'm super sorry. I just get a little weird with my phone, and I also run multiple Instagram accounts, so sometimes a message will get filtered to like my 3D printing one or my personal page, or I play music, and so like I'm running band pages and stuff like that. And so I am sorry to anyone who has messaged me and not gotten a message back. However, I tried to always help. You can always hit me up for help. I just might not always open your message. I'm sorry.
Trust me, I that's been something I've been really like this past year, like really emphasized within myself, like respond to the messages. Like Facebook Messenger for the longest time, I had like an old phone that no matter what just wouldn't give me notifications from Facebook Messenger.
Oh, okay.
For whatever the fuck reason. And I would see messages from like 3 years ago, like inquiring about scrub pythons or whatever. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. A lot of my messages get like that, where it's like, oh, this is 143 weeks ago. I can't message back now. Yeah. So I definitely need to work on that. And especially like, I don't sell a lot of snakes, but if I do want to sell snakes, I need to get better at responding to people. And,
that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. The worst is the person who has an ad up and then won't respond to the messages about that ad. It's like,
I'm not doing that. At least I got no ads up. I'm not.
Why did you post that ad?
What?
I said, why did you post that ad?
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not like that, but I mean, I've given away more snakes than I've sold for sure. If you're a friend and you come over, I might try to find a way to give you a snake. But the thing is, the only person that has gotten clearance to come into my snake room that's a reptile person is actually Brandon, Colt Serpents. He's the that guy. Yeah, he's the only reptile person that's gotten clearance to come in here, I'm pretty sure.
He co-signed.
True. Hell yeah. But yeah, Brandon is a great kid. He's fucking awesome. I think he's going to be breeding a lot of really badass snakes here pretty soon. So I'm low key just trying to like, hey, you want carpet python? Hey, so what's up with them tandem bars? You got a clutch, bro. So yeah, I might plant some seeds for future trades, but we'll see how it goes. He's got a really badass collection.
You showed your hand. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love the episode we did together and breaking down all the scrub localities and stuff like that. Yeah, it was. If you guys haven't checked it out already, go check out Brandon Valentine's episode from probably about a month and a half ago or so. It was a good time.
Yeah, he's one of the other guys that's doing the reduced pattern Darwin project. That group of people, I think right now it's me, Jason Balin, and Brandon might be like the
really
people working on that. Yeah, it was Todd from Psychotic Exotics. It was his thing, and he never really sold any until he got out of the hobby.
Okay. And, yeah. When was that? When did they get out? Because I was into carpets, and then I kind of fell back, and then when I was doing rodents, I didn't have time to pay attention to anything in the hobby.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I just don't see Psychotic Exotics around anymore.
Yeah. It was a couple years ago. I think they had their collection in the back of pet store Reptile Island.
Okay.
And I think they just sold the collection to that pet shop.
Oh, all right.
And so if you go to those California shows, Reptile Island will be posting up usually a bunch of Todd's carpets that were produced at the show. Cool. Yeah. So you can get his stock.
Nice.
I have no idea what they're doing, like as far as breeding goes, because I mean he had really, really crazy stuff. He had a really insane collection.
Yeah, I mean I got my inlands from him. Like I every show I was at, I was just like, you know, gawking over their stuff. It was so fucking cool.
Yeah, and I mean he even had basins, he had diamonds. He had Gary Vale or Gary Valle, I don't know how to pronounce it. He had Gary Vale Valle line of diamonds, which are pretty hard to come by, based on what I've heard. And I think he had Bolin's pythons too. He had a pretty crazy collection. So Reptile Island scored getting that. And then, I mean, I'm sure they got a bunch of Frankenstein snakes, because I've seen pictures of Todd trying to breed an Apodora to a retic.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I mean, I know he had like Brettles crossed into just about every morph. Like he was selling Brettle zebra, caramel jag stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'd really be curious to see what kind of stuff they're working with and what that collection looks like. I don't really live in the area to go scope it out, or I don't even know if that's an option.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to know that those animals are still kicking and hopefully still breeding. But yeah, what's the whole reduced pattern Darwin project? I know very little about it. You know, kind of give us a little bit of a history of what those animals are, where they came from, and all that.
Well, it's a little bit hard to really nail down how it came about, but their Swedish line, like the albino line that was imported back whenever the Darwins came in, and Todd just kept breeding and breeding just that same line, same stock that I think Nick is the one who brought that stock in, actually. And so I think it's technically the same.
Oh, really?
Same line as what Nick has, as far as where the animal came from, because it just popped out of that line, and but
all right.
But the thing is it's a polygenic trait, I think.
Okay.
Based as far as I can tell, but I've got one of the most extreme examples that's ever left Todd's collection, and then Brandon has a male that's pretty close right there too, and I don't know how a polygenic thing could get so far so quickly. Yeah. Because Nick also pointed it out. He's like, I have that same line, Nick. I mean, we can all agree he's really good at selective breeding. I mean, he turned yellow and black jungle into a black and white jungle, and so I don't think it's just a case of selective breeding to get to that really extreme look. I think it just popped out.
Okay.
And then he started working it into projects, but you would think that it would be like a gradual grow, but one of the first ones was insane. And then
interesting.
And then there's been it up and down, like some of them in the clutches are kind of just stripy Darwins, but the colors are really interesting on them. And also I hatched out the Paradox albino from that reduced pattern Darwin male. But yeah, I did get a clutch in 2023 breeding that really extreme male to a 2013 pure Darwin that was also produced by Todd, and she was an albino. So I got about half albinos, half normals. None of them really have the reduced pattern look, but they do have some pretty extreme like striping and a lot of portholes and weird stuff like that. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time, because I only have a male and I don't have a female from the line, for me to produce something that actually looks like that. But we're assuming it's polygenic. And even I had a brief conversation with Nick, and he says that it looks so extreme that he thinks there might be something going on. So he recommended outcrossing it to a different Darwin line. I don't have one. There's very few people working with that line. So I kind of just have to breed it to the Darwin I got. And I also have a Darwin that comes from Nick Mutton's lineage that's really striped, and he'll go to herd this coming season. But hopefully we'll get some more that look like him. But I don't know, because that's the look everybody wants. Because I post that snake, and I get a lot of messages. I get people hitting me up like, I've never seen a Darwin like that. And yeah, there's very few of them. But Jason Balin has 2 females.
Okay.
He doesn't have a male. So I think Brandon, that lucky bastard, is in the best boat by having a male and a female from the line. Everyone else is working with just one. So maybe next year Brandon will pop out something crazy, and it might give us a little better example or a little better idea of kind of what's going on.
Sure.
Because he is, but then it's like, are they recessive or we like? Yeah. And so it's kind of
interesting.
It's kind of weird. So we're not totally sure. And Todd, being when he was in the hobby, was super ghostly and not really public at all.
The pressure is on you, Brandon.
Oh, it's on.
Don't fuck it up.
You got it. But yeah, Todd didn't really. He was not public on. He didn't post a single thing about snakes since after like 2019 or anything. So he has been off the grid. I had one short phone call with him before I bought the snake, and it took a while. I had to schedule a phone call with him through another guy, and he like said, "Yeah, dude, it was a whole ordeal. I don't think he wanted to talk to me. I don't think he wanted to talk snakes. Like, I just don't think he was into it." And so he used to work with people to sell his snakes for him. That way he could just blast Slayer and breed snakes and stuff and not have to really worry about the other side of the hobby.
Yeah.
So like online sales were done by another guy. People have some iffy opinions about that guy, myself included. I won't say his name, but yeah, so it's basically you're having to work third party from a guy who doesn't even live in the state as Todd, of like, hey, well, can you answer this? What do the parents look like? Can I get a picture of the parents? And it's like, let me hit him up. Okay, next week he'll send you a picture of the parents. It's like, okay. But I really wanted that snake, and I spent more on it than anyone's probably spent on a Darwin in 10 years, embarrassingly. But because Brandon got his pair, I'm going to say this, for half the price that I got my male.
Oh!
Yeah. Brandon, you fucker. I'm just kidding. I love you, Brandon. I'm glad that you bought that pair of snakes. But yeah, I was the first guy to get one out of Todd's collection, except for David Van Houten, which is KD Selective, who's good friends with Todd. And so some people had access into Todd's collection that other people just didn't. And so Van Houten had a lot of Todd's like kind of crazier animals that other people weren't able to get. But I think that Jason Balin may have ended up with his and with another guy named Brian Dugan, I think, who was in it for a little, and then he sold his pair to Jason Balin, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, the Darwin thing's been it seems like people have a lot of trouble breeding the Darwins. Very few people I see producing them, and they seem to be able to produce a lot of the other carpets, and they say that they struggle with Darwins. I personally don't see them as any different than any of my other carpets. They do everything the same.
Okay.
And so I don't know if it's how I keep. I think I've heard someone mention that they think that it's because I live, like, Darwin's supposed to be maybe a little hotter and drier than other parts of Australia. And so living in a kind of hotter state, a little drier state, maybe maybe it's just a good environment. Maybe they don't like humidity at all. It's a struggle to get my snake room's 29% humidity right now.
It makes me feel good about what I got going on because I'm not too much higher than that. But
yeah, dude, it's but I don't really have that many issues.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, do you spray snakes? How do you mitigate your humidity?
Spraying, humidifiers, dumping water bowls out into cages.
Yeah,
doing what I can. I think some of the snakes had a bit of a difficulty adjusting from Midwest humidity to desert lack of humidity.
Yeah.
So
with me with humidity, so I used to work in the cannabis industry.
Okay.
And they use a lot of humidifiers, like big industrial ones. And they would use RO water in them. And they would get algae and mold in them so fast. And I tried to run a humidifier, and having the experience of working in the cannabis industry, I was like, I know these things develop mold, and I just couldn't keep it clean enough for my standards of like, it just freaked me out because if you just Google humidifier sick, you will find people like nearly dying from a humidifier that didn't get cleaned. And so it has potential to like blast moldy air or moldy particles into the air. And it just always freaked me out. And so I was like, I'm not even going to mess with it. I don't want to take that chance of like, because I remember listening back to Ed Marino, I believe is when you talked to him. And he talked about how he had a mold issue in the basement of a house that almost killed like a good portion of his collection. And he just never was able to get the mold out of that room, kind of thing. And so I don't know, I get a little bit freaked out with biosecurity stuff like that. So I don't know if you run it. Could be the shitty water that we have here in Arizona.
If the water isn't so great here, but I only use filtered water in my humidifiers, and I clean them on a somewhat regular basis. But yeah, I mean, I don't love it, but like with my adult scrubs, when I first finished out that room, I mean, it's my converted garage. It was like without anything in there, it was like 15% humidity.
Yeah.
And this you could just see it on the snakes. They got like weird and shiny. Their eyes looked kind of glossy. They just looked really dehydrated. And, as soon as I got the humidifier in there, within the next shed cycle, they looked normal again. But yeah, no, it's been a learning curve for me since I've never lived in this. I've never lived in the desert before, so I've only ever kept snakes in the Midwest, where humidity was almost never a problem at all.
Oh yeah, I imagine
any time of year. So
yeah, definitely, especially during the winter, when like I have I'll run an oil heater in here. That's when my humidity really plummets. Yeah. And I don't really get much at all. And so, I mean, with the carpet pythons, I very rarely get a bad shed out of a carpet python. But the scrubs, I feel like, are more likely. The Apodora are notorious bad shedders, but mine just don't shed in one piece. They'll get it all off, but I feel like the scrubs and the Amazon tree boas, those are the ones that are definitely, I got to pay attention a little more to. I do the same thing, kind of dumping out water bowls in cages. So I just try to manage it in each individual cage, kind of thing. Just because I think a good portion of my collection, since it is carpet pythons, really don't need it. So I think it'd be different if I was running mostly scrub pythons and stuff like that and running into way more shed issues than I want to deal with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I think there's also then a conversation of then like humidity and whatnot, then like versus like water quality as well. Yeah. I feel like if that, I filtered all my water, but I'm not even sure that I love that. Like with my rattlesnakes, I don't clean their water, change waters as often as my pythons, because in the wild, those snakes will go weeks without even encountering water.
Yeah.
And then by the time, like, some of the bowls, I have little 2-ounce cups and like babies and whatnot, they'll dry out and you can see little like crystallization sediment at the bottom. I'm like, I don't love that.
Yeah. So that's what we get here. I mean, I don't use like any special type of water, but I do a lot of water changes.
Sure.
And I clean bowls a lot. Just because, luckily here in Arizona, what I've noticed is bowls will dry out before they will mold and stuff.
Yeah.
So like I've seen collections where like cages will get wet and get moldy really quick. I like that here in Arizona, you don't really have to deal with that, but your water bowls will literally dry out in like 4 days if you use the 8-ounce deli cups or something. Yeah. So it forces you to do quite a bit of water changes.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And a lot of my carpets like to poop in their water bowl, which is like my babies, which is the most annoying thing. And so, I every day I walk in here and just clean the waters that need to be changed and kind of thing. And it's usually a lot. Yeah.
For better or worse, I think I may have like, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I have a scrub poop in the water in a year.
Right.
The only snakes I really ever have do that are my rattlesnakes.
They do that? That's interesting.
Yeah. But like, usually every week, I mean, I have a lot of rattlesnakes, but like I can usually count on one a week.
Okay.
Not
usually two carpets or 2 or 3 baby carpets a week probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely is annoying. But yeah, I don't know. I'm getting used to this new climate and everything. Like in Indiana, a lot of my snakes were in a room full of crocodilians and it was 85% humidity all the time, just because there were hundreds of gallons of standing water. So I mean, like if I sprayed any of them, they'd mold over in hours.
Yeah.
So I went from intentionally never spraying to having to spray multiple times a week. And then conversely too, at least I haven't obviously been here for a summer yet, but during the winter, humidity was really not bad. But now that it's warmed up and dried out a little bit, where up north it was, the heat's on, the winter's a little bit drier, maybe you got to spray, and then come summertime, open a window and you're at 75% humidity short. Yeah. But where here it's like quite the opposite, where I'm like, I can't even open the door to my balcony because the room that I'm in here will be 10% humidity in 5 minutes, just because of how the draft will just rip all the humidity out of the room.
Right.
So
I think that's real for anyone listening. That should be a real eye opener for anyone who's trying to get advice from someone on how to keep their snakes, because you just moved and you went from keeping your collection, like you knew how to keep that collection, you were keeping it healthy, and then you moved and you had to completely change how to do it.
Yeah.
And so like you hear it a lot, like, do you spray or do you not spray? It's like, well, where do you live? Like there's so much nuance to this that you have to get good at reading snakes. And the thing that I noticed that you said was the look that they had just after a couple days of being there in the dry climate. You have to be able to look at your snakes and know when something's up, and then just know how to make the right adjustments instead of kind of hoping to get answers from. It's good to ask questions to people, but a lot of times their answers might not help you in any way, might just hurt you if they live in a completely different climate, because they might be saying never spray your chondro where they live, it's 85% humidity and you live in the desert
in South Florida.
Yeah. And so there's just so much nuance with it. And
Riley, unfortunately, that is not common sense. I know you're being facetious, but somehow or another, this is not common sense and has to be said on podcasts repeatedly before people start to listen.
Riley, how many times I'm sure have you been asked if you spray your carpet pythons, or if you? I'm sure Riley gets asked so much on how to. He's like the carpet python personality on YouTube right now, and so like I'm sure he gets loaded with questions that he will have answers for, but it's going to be, if you don't know how to read your snakes properly, you might not be able to take Riley's advice and actually do what is needed. So yeah, it's very tricky. I try to not get too much in like any camp or I try to not get too much in like any camp, or be, the term I like to use is I like to maintain agnosticism with everything. Like I don't get like, oh, this is how things are done, I'm gonna do it like this. I just kind of go with the flow, and I'm going to be ever changing and always try to improve and not set the standard like this is what I got to do every year to get snakes. Like things can change. Like you moved your snakes from one state to another, completely changed how you kept things, and are still getting productions. And so it's like there's not one recipe to do this. The most important thing is being able to look at your snake and know if it's missing something, or if it needs something, or if it's got too much of something. And that's where, in my opinion, for me anyways, as I've gotten better at that, my snake keeping has become a lot less guesswork.
Sure.
It's become like, if I just notice a snake is sitting in a different spot in the cage, I take note of it, not like physically take note, but I go like, why are you here today? Like, and I'll temp gun stuff and make sure there's not a weird hot spot in the room or things like that. But you just got to really flex that muscle and really practice it, of just like looking at your collection and knowing what a good, healthy snake in your room looks like and a not so healthy snake.
Yeah. And I think that, I think a lot of new keepers will hear that and be like, well, how the hell am I going to know? I've been keeping for a year or two. It's like,
it takes time.
It takes time, but you got to be able to have a little bit of confidence in yourself. Like these are your animals. You hopefully look at them every day. You're around them. Like you might not be experienced, but you're experienced with your collection. And if something seems wrong, trust that instinct and explore what that is. And if it seems right, then maybe also trust that instinct if the animals are showing every sign of good health, but you might hear advice from somewhere else that might contradict your keeping. Use a little process of elimination to be like, okay, well, this is all good. This is all good. This is what this person says should be bad, but it's not. Must be fine. Or must be good enough,
Yeah. And just, I think, being able to read them is definitely going to help you if you want to be a breeder, because that has been the thing. That's one of the things that Ryan Young said when I was first getting into like snakes again and listening to podcasts. He may have been talking with you about an ultrasound machine, and he's like, read the snakes. They'll tell you what they want. But it really made me like, okay, like what is he looking at? And I just started watching a little bit differently. And noticing that I was looking for those things that he kind of mentioned, of like females really turning on for food, and that's a good sign. And you got to lay into that if you want some progress with that. But you have to be able to read those times of maybe your snake's not just being bitey at you, like maybe she's trying to build follicles and she wants to eat and stuff. So yeah, reading your snakes is ultimately just gonna, and I mean, for me, it took me a while to really figure out what, and I'm probably still learning a lot every day. Come out here, and I mean, things still go wrong and shit still happens, but I feel like my stress level of how to manage a collection goes down as I get better at this. Yeah. And as my collection grows, I feel like I get more and more confident with what I'm doing, and more sure, like I'm figuring out my methods and my formula, and with incubation and anything like that. So building a system.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Call back to what we were saying earlier about the ball python breeders. the ball python breeders, they do what they do the way they do because it works really, really, really well. And that took decades to get to the point of, we use these racks and these parameters with this temperature cycle, this type of feeding, like, and now look, there's more ball pythons than you could ever know in the world. When they were first brought in, they were supposed to be this unbreedable snake, which is crazy to think about in hindsight, but it just goes to show the value of creating that system.
Yeah.
Where that was, that there was a emphasis put on, okay, how do we make this work? There are these weird colored ones that are coming over and they're valuable. People want them. And we don't know what it looks like when you put this color with this pattern and this color. We want to do all of this. Okay, but how are we actually going to functionally do this? Because the old guard of, 40-gallon open top enclosures and whatnot probably wasn't working for them.
Right.
The same thing can go for anything. The system will look different, but the process of figuring out what that is virtually the same no matter what you're dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of mentioned something that kind of sparked an idea or thought into my head with the wild colored ball pythons coming over. So maybe we can touch on the weird looking scrubs that have been popping up.
Let's do it.
So do you think that those are going to ruin the hobby? Do we need to lop those things heads off right now? Go pull any weird colored snake out of the wild and tell it that it's going to screw up the hobby and kill them? Or are we probably maybe okay? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think the two of us are still here and we seem to be doing okay. No, I mean, the concern is valid, but I don't think it's warranted.
Well said.
Because I've thought a lot about this. There are scrub pythons have always had patternless, striped, axanthic. Those kind of phenotypes exist within almost the population of scrub python. But now there's the albino or the T-positive barneck, which has been around for a long time. There's that kind of like leucistic-y looking Halmahera. Both are owned by the guy, and I think he's in South Korea. And then a couple months ago, that ivory looking Jayapura scrub popped up. And now the last couple of days, this kind of leucistic looking southern scrub has popped up. It's definitely a double-edged sword, because I think us scrub purists, there's a bit of a pride in like, these animals are cool without needing morphs. We think that they're just the coolest snake you could ever possibly own, and part of what makes them so cool is the natural variability that they have. I have, thank God, every possible look of scrub python that you could in captivity currently. I haven't made any cross pairings or anything like that. I'm nothing particularly against it. At the end of the day, for me, it's just I have so many space and can only really house so many animals, and I already can't do everything I want to within the pure forms. So I just think I have the bandwidth to take on crossing. With that said, though, I would grab those morphs in a heartbeat if I could. I think I started off as a ball python person and was interested in green trees and carpet pythons, and I bred leopard geckos for a handful of years. This is all making cool colored stuff. I think the issue has always come to the forefront when it's like, okay, this thing looks like this and it's different for whatever reason. And if you buy it now for a lot of money, in 3-4 years, you're going to make a lot more money. And that is where the value is assessed in that animal. I don't think that necessarily has to be the pitch. I think you can, at least for me, when anyone inquires on scrub pythons, I just say why I think that they're the coolest snake out there, and not buy them now, because when you breed them, you're going to make so much money. Because who knows? This is something like, this is not a guarantee. That's the pitch of ball pythons, and by the time your triple recessive female is adult size, that snake is a quarter of the value it was when you bought it. Snake markets are weird. As long as the emphasis is still on what that animal is, what makes it special, I think I don't worry about morphs ruining whatever it might ruin, because just because morphs exist doesn't mean that people like us aren't going to be tracking lineages and doing the things that we always wanted to do and refining different locality types, and it doesn't take that away. I think objectively, a white scrub python and callback this scrub python, for anyone watching, if you put those two side by side, I'm going to go with the one on the screen right now.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the white scrub python isn't cool, but a gold and black banded bar neck with a solid pale colored tail to me is like the perfect snake. So one of the things that some of the detractors were saying when that ivory scrub popped up was like, all right, what if this ends up in the hands of some sort of like influencer or somebody? And we haven't been name dropping for the sake, but I'm going to do this. If that scrub python ended up a nerd, I would lose my mind. I'd be like, that's like the worst thing that could have happened to this animal. With that said, though, these are not easy snakes to breed yet. They're being figured out slowly but surely. But just because you get this wild caught morph snake into your collection, for one, you don't even know if that snake's going to live, whether or not it's going to breed, whether or not you're going to get good eggs, whether or not babies will be viable. Like it's a pretty big risk, especially for the kind of money, because these guys in Papua, they have social media. They know what's up in the U.S.
Yeah, he posted it on Facebook.
Yeah, they know they know what animals sell for. They go on Morph Market, and they do everything that we do. So they're not ignorant to what's going on. They know that if captive bred scrub pythons are selling for anywhere between like $700 and $2,000, like this one that looks like none that have ever been seen before, they'll ask 10, 12 grand for that snake. Is that snake worth that much money? Probably not, but go buy the other one, Yeah. If it's a one of one, they can ask with it whatever they want. I've been kind of rambling, I want to get your take on it too. Obviously, I'm interviewing you, but what I will say, this one, and also the pictures of this one have not been very good. The ivory Jayapura from a couple months ago, there were some really good images of that snake. What I will say, I have never seen probably even 20% of the attention brought to scrub pythons over the course of a few days than were brought to scrub pythons when that animal hit the internet.
Really?
People who are like ball python breeders who I'm friends with on Facebook were reposting it, being like, or like retake people like, look at this snake. Oh my God. Like, that doesn't happen for someone posts like a xanthic pattern tandem bar that's beautiful, a snake that like is coveted by scrub python people. People like it. You're not seeing that snake shared 100 different places by people who've never even owned a scrub python.
Right.
Morphs, they bring attention to stuff. It's what they do. But it's our jobs as the scrub python community to take those new eyes and push them in the right direction.
100%.
That's where you make or break the scenario, because retic people, the ones that you would say, and I'm going to preface this by saying I know a lot of retic people who are, they're great people. They do well by their animals, but there's the kind of stigma of the retic bro of like they're just milling morphs for money, and you don't want that mentality getting into this species that has been, you know, selectively bred and whatnot for however long, and people are really passionate about locality types and whatnot. You don't want that mindset infecting whatever. Well, that only happens if we let it happen as the community who's been doing it for as long as we have.
Right.
You know, there are crosses out there. I mean, Alexandra's made some awesome Barneck Southern crosses that I think are really cool. And she does a very good job at marketing them as exactly what they are. And anyone who gets those from her, I'd have to imagine if someone tried to pass those off as a pure whatever, that wouldn't get them too far. You know, they get called out pretty quick.
And I mean, I've seen like what she's selling them for, and I mean, if you wanted to try to pass it off as like a pure Southern or something, you could. It'd be cheaper just to go buy a pure Southern,
right? Yeah,
and so like it's you can continue. Sorry.
Well, the last thing I'll say, and I'll give her some credit, is that the way that she has those animals priced and marketed, I think it's perfect. I think she could probably even sell them for a little bit more than she has. But the thing that would really be a detriment to scrub pythons as a whole, is if those crosses were $500, $1,000 higher than pure whatever. Because then a new person would say, okay, I have a Barneck and a Barneck. If I breed them, they are worth this much. But I have a Barneck and a fucking Tannenbar. No one's done that before. I'm going to sell those babies for $4,000 a piece. Okay, well, inevitably you would go chase that because that's where the money would supposedly be.
So but the chondro world is what you're saying.
Right. Well, chondros got muddied up from the start. So there's no.
Yeah, it was all the same thing when they started. So.
Yeah, but then to their credit, you know, they were just green tree pythons.
Yep, it was all one species back then.
For years. So, but then also to their credit, you know, it's like when you buy, you know, Patrick, I think he's still here. He said that he preferred rain over that ivory, but guys like him who've been involved in this for decades, even people who've been doing this for longer than Patrick, like when they're selling you that designer chondro, they can give you the pedigree that traces it back to the wild caught animals.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is like, that just solves everything. Oh God damn it! I just gave Brandon a terrible idea. Well, all right, I guess we're fucked. Brandon's gonna make all the money on the cross scrubs and the
he's gonna be rolling around in a Bentley next year. All this scrub cross money, fur coat, gold chain.
God, look at what we've done.
I know, we did it. We ruined the scrub community right now.
Damn, just like that, as we try to save it. No, but I guess I'll let you go now. But I think there's a way to do it right, a way to do it wrong, and we haven't done it wrong yet. So who's to say we can't do it right? You know?
Yeah.
Oh, your thoughts? Yes.
I mean, I think the snakes look really cool. Those new funky scrubs that I don't think they look cooler than gold Moluccan. I don't think they look cooler than a lot of scrubs, and I think most people would agree with that.
Sure.
And I feel like we have there's been so many morphs that are in scrubs. They're so hard to figure out what their mode of inheritance is, because even great scrub python breeders are not able to breed every single scrub that they've got. And so they could have a funky one that looks really cool, really crazy, just never gives you babies. And you don't hear of a lot of the retic ball python guys stick it out with projects. I think like you would have to stick it out with scrubs. And it never popped into my head of like, oh no, this is what might happen. I knew that's what people were going to think, because I've heard that thing before said of like, the worst thing that could happen to scrubs is a morph. but
Yeah.
we've already got morphs, like, and people don't necessarily value them any higher than, I mean, I bought a bunch of patternless Highland animals for pretty damn cheap compared to, I mean, like any scrub at this price right now. And so, and none of those crazy looking animals we've had have ever attracted the retic mindseted people of like, I'm going to breed scrubs, or I'm going to breed snakes to get rich, and I'm going to do it with this new scrub morph.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening because it's too much of a gamble when, like, I think it's pretty public knowledge right now that if that snake came across your Facebook feed, you're probably pretty deep into reptiles. And you've got a lot of friends in the industry. You probably listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
A lot of people listen to the same podcast now. And I think a lot of people are kind of under the same impression of like, there's very few species that are like actually looked at as the get rich ones. And it's hard to convince people that anything other than like ball pythons and some geckos, like if someone's going to try to, if someone can convince you that you're going to get rich off of breeding scrubs, you haven't been in the industry very long. You haven't listened to a podcast about scrub pythons.
Right.
And so the odds of you dropping 10 grand on one when you know nothing about the community, and that you're going to be looked at as a pariah, and people are going to be like, yo, you got this ivory Wamina Jaya type and bred it to a bar neck in a southern, like, we're not going to buy it. Like, who is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to give you 10 grand? Nobody in the scrub community. Maybe some other retic guys or ball python guys, but good luck breeding those snakes, because even the F1s and F2s are hard. I guess, let me correct. I don't think the scrubs are hard to breed. I think
Either.
I think that they have to be a little bit older than most snakes generally. But I think once you figure out like the parameters, I wouldn't say it was like, oh, it's difficult, I was having to fucking do all this crazy stuff. It was just like, you pair them at the right time, feed them meals at the right time, and it can go. So I don't necessarily think breeding scrubs is difficult. I think it's difficult to raise a pair of animals up to breeding size and have your room dialed in, like dialing in a snake room where your snakes can be comfortable. That's the difficult part. Once you learn how to do that and manage snakes, I think scrubs are easy to keep for sure. And then breeding, I think it's just one of those things where we're plagued by that underfeeding thing for a little bit. And I guess I kind of steered away from the morph scrub thing. Anyways, I don't think that those snakes will be an issue. I just don't see it happening. Scrubs are a very tight-knit, interesting community. I'm pretty sure everybody who breeds scrubs or has had a clutch of scrubs and has been public about it, if you're in that industry or you keep scrubs and you're in the Facebook groups, you know about it. It's not like this is like a crazy huge web of people. Like, there's very few clutches hitting the ground a year, and if you are in the circle, you're going to hear about it, kind of thing. So it's just everyone knows each other, and everyone has, I think, not knows, but they see them on Facebook, and you see the conversations of how people talk about crosses and stuff like that. And I think what you said about Alexandria's pricing, I think that was perfect what you said, like, of valuing them like at that mark, not more than the pure stock. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the carpet python world got weird, I guess, is if you go buy morph combos, they're expensive. Morphs are expensive in carpets, and you can buy really badass, crazy selective bred jungles, pure West Papuan carpets, Darwins. You can get almost any of those species for like $500. Yet the morphs even though no one seems to really, there's not a lot of people that are gung-ho over the morphs and carpets, they're priced really high. And it has further deterred, I think, the two camps within carpets, where it's like, I feel like less people are getting into the morphs because you can get really badass pure stuff for cheap.
Yeah.
But I think that there should be a little more value put into the pure stock of, like, I don't think, maybe this is just how I look at it, I don't think that pure, like, really selectively bred West Popland should go for $350 or $400. I think there's a lot of work that went into that snake, and if you're really proud of that, post it for more and turn it, because I heard Garrett Hartle talk about that at one point. Of he priced the snakes that were like his pure stock or whatever super high, and it was just a way to make people like realize, like, oh, what's the value in this? Like, I'm looking at this snake, it looks like a normal kind of thing, it doesn't have a crazy morph, it's not an albino, why is this thing so expensive? Oh, it's because there was several generations of selective breeding that have gone into it, where you can create morph combos, turn around pretty quick, and they also go for a lot more. And so I feel like just those two things aligning in the carpet world has created like a little bit of like this divide where it feels like there's two specific camps that don't really coexist amongst one another. Like, you've got crazy morph maker guys, and then you've got just purists.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Garrett Hartle thing, because I think there's actually a fairly close comparison you can draw between Popland carpets and then the locality dwarf, super dwarf retakes, where they kind of serve the same purpose. Not the same purpose, but a similar purpose in either species complex, where, you know, with Garrett, when he was making these locality types popularized, he's like, well, this will be the ticket to these morphs that we like in a smaller size, and then also outcross genetics for now that the mainlands we can't import retics at all. So these are just bottlenecking. These over here, we can bring them in, make them smaller, make them healthier, you know, all very good points. And then with the Popland carpets, that's the key to further genetic diversity, considering that wild caught animals are still a thing. I just don't, so I have like a toe in retics and a toe in carpet pythons, but that's really about it. I don't think that in carpet pythons that was pushed nearly as well as what Garrett did with the retics. Where, like, theoretically, like the Kalatoa retics, I feel like that's probably the biggest example, because they're like one of the smaller locality types, and there are like multiple lineages that you can trace back to wild caught animals. Whether or not they're all actually Kalatoa is a different story, but they're not mainland giant, whatever the fuck, and they're not related to the morphs. So that's why in like 2019 he could sell pairs of babies for like $7,000 or whatever the fuck. I mean, imported Popland carpets, what, and then maybe like $200-$300 snakes.
Yeah, you can get them real cheap.
So, and obviously the carpet python market was never quite the big money market retics was, but that to me is like, should be more valuable than the morphs, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot of value to be put on like fresh stock. And especially because I think that we're at risk of getting inbreeding depression with a lot of the with the carpets that we have. I mean, because I was told by a big breeder that does pure stuff that he will only outcross, like, let's say it's a line of jungles, he will only outcross the line once he starts hitting genetic defects. And to me, So what happened? What if you sold a pair of those babies the year before? They're already like on the precipice of hitting that genetic wall. I feel like a lot of that might be happening in carpets.
Happened to me.
Yeah. Cancer kills a lot of carpet pythons. And like I hear of a lot of people, cancer hasn't killed any carpets for me, but not a ton of my stock is super old. But to me, I mean, if you go to the doctor and they ask you, like, do you have people in your family that have cancer, heart diseases, or any of this, it's because that stuff's pretty genetic. And if you end up with some of that stuff in your lines and you just refuse to outcross even to a line, I think you're just slowly burning that candle down and you're going to hit a wall eventually. And then those babies that you were producing of like, okay, I raised up a male, bred it back to the mom, good, worked. 2 years later, breed one of those new babies back to mom, and oh shit, I just hit a genetic wall. These are all not doing great.
Yeah.
What if you sold a bunch of those ones the year before and they are just, their first clutches might be not so great? You just, because there is a lot of talk of like the granite stuff was messed up because it was so inbred.
Yeah.
And I think we get a little bit of like, we put the blinders on to stuff like that when it comes to pure stock, because we're like, it's pure, but it's also inbred for generations and generations. And you might have cancer in the line or something like that. And I feel like it could just hit a point where if we don't start plugging in some wild caught blood into projects, we might kind of hit a bad wall. And I mean, this could be 60, 70 years from now. But if what we think we're doing is that important, can we really inbreed the same lines that most of our carpets a lot of them came from Europe, where they were bred by people there and then they were imported here.
Right.
So can we really inbreed things forever and ever? I just don't know if we can. Maybe some species it'll work and be totally fine. But we've seen it hit a wall really fast when you put some morphs in there, and then but people kind of fight back. They're like, well, it's the morph's bad. It's like, or is it that the morphs now are bad because they are inbred and no one did that much inbreeding of breeding baby back to mom back, and then those babies back to grandma. That's kind of what, like, I don't know. I don't think we've done enough breeding yet to really see what it could do in the long run, but I think it's something that could happen. But we run the issue in the carpet python community where that's not something that people like, and it ultimately will diminish the value of your stock. And so if you have a great line of jungles, because I mean, it turns out, I guess all the diamond lines we have, they did DNA testing on them and they're all related.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So maybe diamonds will be like the first thing, if it can happen. Maybe it will happen in diamonds. But what about the jungle lines? Because we got people, I've got this line, that line, that line, that line. What if they're all related too? Like, you're not going to be able to outcross, or you only can so much at a certain point. So yeah, that's I think it's just one of the weird things within the carpet python community that we have to, at some point, probably face it and be like, hey, we have no fresh blood in a lot of these projects. Because if you listen to guys like, I don't know if you're familiar with Darren Whitaker from Morelia by Design. He lives in Australia.
Yeah.
The silver pepper guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Anytime he hatches out like a cool morph combo, he'll breed it out to a wild type that's completely unrelated. He says to maintain like good genetic diversity within his lines, but he'll breed them to a Brettles. Like the Australian guys go kind of crazy with it. But I think there's room for people to do that here, and we'll probably produce snakes that are totally healthy and fine. We just have this stigma of you're going to go in and muddy everyone's lines up and that. But I know that people produce scrub crosses in the past, quite a bit. And I think actually Yasser did it. How many people do you know with one of those animals that is trying to pass it off as something that it's not?
Or even has them at all.
Or has them at all.
Yeah.
So ultimately, and I mean, just think of what happened with Chondros when Rico passed.
Yeah.
Like, how many people really have Rico Walder's stock of Chondros? And that guy was producing apparently like a couple hundred a year at one point.
Nearly as many as should.
Yeah. And so I don't think that there's really a whole lot that you can do in that anyone can do in their snake building that is gonna have these mutt snakes make it out into the market and just start dirtying up people's lineages. I just don't see it happening. It's just such a crazy process, and people that care about pure animals aren't gonna buy some crazy cross or buy a random snake from a pet shop and be like, this is the new pure coastal in my project, and then they're going to get a bunch of money. Like, it just, I don't see the puzzle pieces fitting all together to be this thing that, like, if you create crosses or hybrids, there goes that community. Like, it's all just shit now. I just don't see it. I think that there's too many people keeping snakes. There's too many people that work on specific projects, and a bunch of people don't like morphs or crosses, and those people are going to always be doing what they're doing. And I don't think, I think it's good to have both. It's kind of like, I mean, I'm a musician. I come from the metal industry. The way that metalheads talked about like the digital music era making its way into, they just thought it was the worst thing ever. But the bands that just were like, oh cool, this is a new thing we can do, let's do it, more noise, like we're just making noise here. But people get way too like tribal about it, and it becomes like an identity for them of like they can't even look at a snake and be like, hey, is that pure or is it a cross? It's a cross. Never mind. It's a fucking snake. I thought we were snake lovers. I thought, and so there just gets to be too much of this talking shit about snakes. And that's where you lose me. Like, dude, it's an animal. Like, it's a snake, and we're snake lovers. Like, I thought the people that were talking shit about snakes are the people that don't like snakes. And so I understand, like, maybe if you want to talk about how certain communities navigate themselves or whatever, but it's not the animal. So don't, like, there's just the term garbage snake or throwaway snake, trash snake just gets thrown around a lot, and it's just kind of gross to me. And it's always when it comes to like morphs, or they'll say like, morphs are bullshit, there's just a bunch of broken genes. It's like, well, some of those broken genes survived in the wild to become a nearly adult scrub python, so how fucking broken is it? Right. And I mean, is a patternless scrub python a broken gene snake? I don't think so. I don't think it's broken. It's a genetic, it's nature being like, let's try something new, let's see if this works. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a jag. Like, and even jags kick ass as far as like thriving with snakes. I never have issues out of jags other than them trying to just hold their head still. I mean, like, I feel like if a jag was it, people were like, oh, that would be food in the wild. Jags, when they're mean, they do this strike where they just open their mouth and they're gonna fling their body, and anything that gets in front of it is getting latched onto. And so if you're an animal in the wild trying to fight a jag carpet, you're gonna lose. Like, I struggle trying to get some of them out of their tubs, and I think that a jag would thrive. It would look weird. It would definitely be funky looking in the wild, going upside down. But those things can eat and bite hard as hell. Like, I I don't love the jag gene. I have jags for sure, but not every morph is a jag. And
Sure.
I think I think a reason why a lot of the stigmas happen around morphs is just because of what the people do. It's not so much the snakes. I think if you were to take any of these designer snakes that people are like, I don't like designer chondros, and you take us back 30 years before they were influenced by whatever politics they think, and you show them that snake, you show them a sickness or any of those insane chondros, no one's gonna say, no, that's not cool. You're gonna be mind blown, and you're not gonna. And I think too many people just get a little too inside of the politics side of things, when in reality, we're just keeping snakes, and it's not that important of a thing, actually. Like in the grand scheme of the world, we love it. I love animals. I love working with snakes. They make me super happy. But I can honestly say I don't think it's like an important thing for the world. And so I think sometimes we can get a little on our high horses and think that we're doing something with conservation or whatever. I think we're keeping snakes in boxes, and we're doing the best we can. And it doesn't have to be that serious and crazy. And I think we're kind of getting out of that, but we still have a lot of old school people that linger around that were in the crazy time.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree on that. I think some people who probably have a little bit of an internal conflict of, is this the right thing to do, to be keeping animals in captivity? Well, then we'll push the conservation narrative to kind of come to internal peace with themselves on what they're doing. If you, like, for instance, any Australian reptile, if you're breeding an Australian reptile in the United States, and if you say it has anything to do with conservation, what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm gonna send these jags back to the wild, man.
Like, how could you make that connection rationally? It's impossible. Even like with the scrub pythons, I would say it's more of like conservation of them in captivity, if anything. Because as much as we'd like to think like, okay, if we breed them, we don't need imports, and then takes pressure off the wild populations. You think those people are just going to not collect anymore?
They're going to start skinning them because they need money, and they're going to sell skins, and they're
all going to go to Japan and South Korea, and we're going to go elsewhere. That we can't stop that.
Yep.
No matter if we want to or not.
Yeah, they make money in the animal trade. Because I'm not sure if you listened to the Cameron from Bushmaster talk on NPR.
Recently,
it was a while back.
Yeah, I've heard that episode.
Yeah, so he was talking about he was just going, before there was a reptile trade here, he would go there and there would be these skinners with tables full of snakes. Like those people are going to collect and make money however they can to feed their families, and if we stop buying them, they're going to get turned into boots or something like that. And so I think that's one way that we can look at what we're doing as listen, these snakes are going to get caught and either killed, or it can take a shot of surviving in my place, and I can try to do right by it. But I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is I don't think we're doing anything so life-changing for the world or anything like that. And even no matter what you do in your snake room and how many snakes you produce, look at Rico. That guy, you would think that guy, I bet he thought in his head, man, I put green tree pythons on the map. I established lineages, tons of people have my stock. How many people still have Rico animals, and where is the green tree python community at right now? We're still having to import stuff, or stuff still gets imported. We can breed them, but it's not like you would expect it to be after someone went through, because it's if you hatched out 200 scrubs a year, I honestly think if you decided to get out of it, it's not like what you did would establish for long. It takes another Stephen Kush to keep that going.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you can't expect like, oh yeah, I gave a bunch of I sold animals to a bunch of different people. I established long-term lineages, and this hobby is going to be like, no, a lot of those animals in 10 years will be unavailable. And we think that we do a lot for a certain species, or I imagine that's how people in the past feel. Like, look at Yasser producing all kinds of scrubs back in the day, and he's sold them, and it's up to the people who get those animals to kind of push that thing forward, and it's up to the community as a whole to move it. And like, not one person is going to come in and either establish everything for forever or ruin everything forever.
That is definitely true.
Yeah, because if so, then I mean, you would think that green trees, there's been some heavy hitters that have come through the green tree python community, but they're a difficult snake. Like, just like scrubs, like sometimes they might just die on you. They might get cancer. You never know. And so you just gotta, I don't want to go through my whole reptile career butting heads with people about the snakes that I like. And I feel like a lot of my experience being back in this, when I try to be involved in the community, I feel like I feel like an outsider, kind of. And yeah, so I think that people just get a little too crazy about this, thinking that like, yo, if I don't breed these pure Darwins, then they're going to be gone off the face of the planet, but before my grandchildren see them.
Yeah.
I mean, if something happens to you, that could be the case anyways. Like, because some people might just not want to breed pure Darwins anymore, because not a lot of people seem to really like them. I mean, there's a handful of guys in the carpet community. And so I think it's important, and I like producing pure Darwins, but I don't think that I'm doing anything long-term to establish anything with these snakes, because a lot of people that get them can never breed them. Maybe they just never won't care to, and you can't control that. And so when snakes leave your place, what those projects do is kind of out of your hands. And I mean, I don't think people should necessarily be held to such a high standard of like, you can't do this with your animal because you might do this to the community. Yeah. Unless it's like literally, I think there might be some lines, but even the craziest snake crosses you can think of, Bolins and a carpet, like that didn't ruin anything. If anything, it made the guy realize like, okay, I forget, he knew that it wasn't the male's Bolin's issue at that point. Yeah. He was like, this dude can breed. It's my female. I don't know how to get her to ovulate. Yeah. So, yeah. And that snake didn't go on, tried to get passed as a pure Bolin's or a pure carpet, just like I don't think a lot of the morph stuff would do.
Yeah. No,
with scrubs.
I agree. I think, you'd have to have like a pretty significant setup where you're producing like 10, 15 clutches of these weird hybrids, and like there's to be a really conscious effort, because even like, I mean, there aren't really many popular hybrids at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, green trees and carpets, technically, yeah, a lot of these are hybrids, but like was never the intention, Right. Like there's green tree pythons that are like quad hybrids, but not on purpose.
And they're still valued tremendously high.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. Even like, the like ball python, or blood python hybrids, or Angolan ball, the bat eaters. Like there's a lot of hybrids that have been produced, but like they're just never. I don't think they're that sought after.
No.
Like Carpondros, like for anybody who wants a Carpondro, there's probably 500 people who want a green tree python.
Exactly. And so that's exactly why I feel like a lot of these crazy morph stuff that come in, I think we get all freaked out about it. The community starts going crazy. It's like, oh my God, here it goes. Fucking Malukan, Wamina, Jaya, Ivory crosses are coming up next. Like, I just don't think anyone wants to do that. and especially anyone in the scrub community. I mean, there might be a small handful of people that want to make crosses, and if anything, that just it's a snake for someone who likes crosses to buy.
Yeah.
And if they buy it, they bought it because it was a cross. Because you could buy a southern or a barneck, like wild caught one or whatever, for a little cheaper. And so if you're going to spend the extra money, like, it's because it was a cross, and that is important to you, and you're probably going to show it off, like I see people doing with Alexandria scrub, saying, I got this badass scrub from her, and they say what it is. It's a cross, and I haven't seen a single person that got one of those animals try to pass it off as something else. And so I just don't think that kind of stuff may have happened back in the day, before every clutch was posted on Instagram and you could really follow everyone's last little like maneuver. And so I just don't see that kind of stuff causing a huge ruckus, other than just chatter online. People are going to argue about things and try to use this as an opportunity to persuade people onto their side. So let me hash out a bunch of things that could, like a bunch of hypothetical stuff, and I don't see a lot of it happen. Maybe it has happened and I haven't been around long enough to see it, but I would love to hear of like a species getting screwed over by like hybridizing and making crosses when you're doing it intentionally, where it's like you said, like in the early days of chondros, they bred a bunch of stuff together not realizing, and now it's like, oh shit, okay, that whole stock's designer now. And at least they did something cool with it, and they made it to where it's like, okay, let's just make badass looking snakes. And I think that is equally as cool as doing pure stuff. And so
I mean, I think probably the only real examples you can look at, and these weren't ruined, like they're corn snake morphs that are just, they are hybrids. Woo!
But a lot of corn people seem to be okay with it. Even people that are purists when it comes to pythons are okay with having these crazy corn things. So it's like, you set a double standard on the thing that you have the most financial investment in or whatever, but like you don't care. It's like hold the standard across the board. Like if you don't like crosses, don't like crosses. Don't like crosses because it might mess up your projects. I think another example is in the short tail complex, of like, you know, the 3 species have been hybridized, but like, find me those animals, you know, like what's sought after. Okay, like probably the blood morphs are like the most sought after, and then probably after that the Borneo short tail morphs, like, and then pure black Sumatrans. Okay, well, we've established what's popular. None of I mean, unless some of the blood morphs are truly from hybrids. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know enough. Like, seems like the crosses didn't catch on. Yeah, and I mean, it could have been like just a thing from the past of like these people trying to protect what they love so much. But I think we just get steered a little too, like, I think we go a little too crazy with it, because ultimately people don't like crosses that much unless you produce something that looks really wild, like the chondros. I mean, I've never seen a bad looking chondro, and so it's kind of hard to go bad with those snakes. But they just, I think they did it right with calling them designers instead of mutts, and then just working on selectively breeding and shooting for viable clutches with that crazy stock. It seems like is what people are going for now.
But I do think, though, at least from my vantage point, the top example of crosses muddying up some sort of species complex probably is carpet pythons.
The people that are, I I think they hold the highest opinion about it without realizing they're like, it's like Spider-Man meme, pointing their fingers.
But I mean, like, I think if you take somebody who's just like a reptile person but doesn't really know carpet pythons, and you show them like a Brisbane coastal or a Brettles diamond jungle jag, which snake do you think they're gonna like more?
Right. Yeah, because like when anybody, reptile lover or not, sees my gamma jag, they go, holy shit, I didn't know snakes could do that.
Right.
And so that's one of those things that the cross got us there, I think, crossing it in with a diamond. And that's a good example of like, okay, that's something that you can do and good results come from it, just like doing the designer chondro stuff. If you're crossing, I understand if you're breeding West Papuan to a coastal, just because those are the two snakes that you have. It doesn't seem like you're trying to accomplish anything with that pairing other than just producing babies. Yeah. But if you have like an idea in mind of like, I'm going to breed it to this because I really like the oranges, or if you have something, and then you're also going to probably be honest about it because of the amount of work that it took you to make that project happen. But yeah. I think gamma jags are a great example of like that cross or that hybrid that turns out pretty damn good almost every single time. Those diamond jungle jags look really good.
So this is a question I have for you as someone who doesn't know nearly as much about the carpet world as you do. So there are a ton of crosses, and it seems like it's generally pretty accepted. Is there something that's stopping people from like taking these like established lines of jungles and breeding them to like Palmerstons or Gelatins to diversify the bloodlines, and then take those diversified bloodline animals and then work back to the color?
People definitely are doing it.
Okay.
The people that have issues with it are the ones that are like, it's a locale, like it's the only locale carpet or jungle carpet we have, or whatever. Yeah. We have such very few Gelatins and Palmerstons, so they're like, I kind of get that, because it's kind of like what they say with, what is it, the Meraki chondro? Yeah. How everyone just kind of made crosses with it. They never made more Meraki chondros. And so we ended up kind of losing it. I understand it with things like a Brisbane, where it's like, it is a locale. So try to make more of them, because it's a rare thing to have for us carpet python guys. Yeah. But I think it's also, you should not be afraid to put it to another pure coastal or whatever, because it's technically still a pure animal. And so it's like, with that, yeah, I'd say it's a little bit different than when it comes to like the scrub locale stuff. Like with scrubs, it's quite, we need to establish like more of them, I guess. And it's also, we don't know genetically the DNA behind a lot of the scrub stuff. So right. Doing different locales could be hybridizing. With carpets, we know that's not. Yeah. Because now we know that apparently like the northern coastals and jungles are the same thing.
Huh, okay.
So and then Darwin's and the West Papuan carpets are the same thing, genetically. Yet there's still a little bit of stigma of like, if you're going to go breed a Darwin to a West Papuan, people are like, because there's this mindset. But it's like, no, we have the science now that tell us it's the same thing. So it's like, do we care about pure stuff or do we care about locale stuff? Yeah. With scrubs, it's different, because we don't know genetically if a southern and a highland are, if DNA turns out that they're the same thing. I think people will be a little more back, okay, well, let's just do a locality cross instead of making a hybrid.
Yeah, but I think then the biggest difference between the scrub dilemma and the carpet dilemma is that with scrub pythons, I mean, you would need to make at this point a really conscious effort to genetically bottleneck a scrub python.
Yeah.
Like, that would take like 3-4 generations of like, I am only going to breed siblings. So, but then with the carpets, it's like, okay, we have this locality, we can either keep it as is or use it to bolster the you know, the health of this other lineage. That's where I don't really know because I'm not involved. Like, but I feel like that's kind of it's a strong like point of debate. I'd feel like, because for instance, like if you have some sort of really nice line bred jungle and you have a Palmerston male, breeding that male, you can breed it to a Palmerston female the same year. But then if you also breed it to that unrelated jungle, I don't really see that as causing any problems.
No, I don't either. I think a lot more people are definitely starting to do that. I'm seeing Palmerstons plugged into other stuff. The one that is still getting a lot of pushback is gelatins.
Yeah.
And so it's a gelatin jungle. But
yeah,
I think maybe Paul Harris bred his to a jungle zebra. That's a pure jungle zebra. But people were like, that's not a gelatin zebra. You can't call it a gelatin zebra. It just created a bunch of weird stuff, and people were kind of pissed about it, it seemed like, which I don't understand why. I don't know. Maybe people will come around when it comes to the gelatins, but I don't know why you would necessarily take a gelatin and look at your smoking black and yellow jungle line and be like, this is going to be the thing that takes it to the next level. Right. It's probably going to bring you back a couple steps look wise, but so it'd be smart to do it with a Palmerston who's at least like on that same color grade.
Yeah.
As opposed to gelatins look like something totally different.
But like, I feel like then the obvious outcross is a gelatin to an ivory, right?
Yeah, you take two projects that Nick has done a lot of selective breeding on and cross them together and get back to me. I think it's that. I think if you told specifically Nick that you were going to buy those two you wanted those two snakes to breed them, he probably would not sell them to you.
Sure, and I understand.
Yeah. I'm all for exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm saying it just from a genetic standpoint of keeping these animals healthy for generations to come. Because like for me, like I had a pair of inland carpet pythons and they were siblings. I bred them and not the strongest clutch. A couple of babies took off, did great. I ended up selling them to people who I believe still have them now. But I had like 4 babies that I lost some never ate, like they were small. And I'd have to believe that that's some sort of genetic bottlenecking going on there.
I would assume so. It's really hard to say because, I mean, this debate happens a lot because rough scale pythons, there's 5 of those that were clutch mates, I think, that were imported originally. And people aren't having issues out of theirs, although I have heard of someone getting one that was kinked. But that's a lot of inbreeding that's happened with that species, but not a ton of people are working on the project.
How many generations deep are any rough scales in the world? Maybe 4? Maybe I doubt even 4. I mean,
that's a good point.
Like they were thought to be extinct when carpet pythons were being bred in captivity.
Yeah, but if you ask the carpet python community, a lot of people will say that the genetic bottlenecking that you get is when you inbreed with a morph. And they blame it on the morph. They're like, well, granted, you inbred, but it's like you inbred a bunch of them and you didn't. But now that the granites are outcrossed, because I've heard people say the same thing about albino. I've never had an issue out of an albino carpet. I've got like 30 of them. Like, yeah. And so, people said they are terrible eaters. No, mine, no problem eating. They're beasts. Every Darwin carpet I have is a tank. But a lot of people said that there's something going on with the albinos. something wrong with the granites? It's like, or is it that we're doing a lot of inbreeding?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I would, as someone who isn't like up on, I don't know as nearly as much as the people who are probably making these claims, but just from the standpoint of this is a morph, how do you get more of them quickly? You inbreed them.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel like they would be the propensity to inbreed a morph would be much greater than that of a wild type, because you have no incentive. You don't have any extra incentive to inbreed that wild type.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you just don't have, unless like if I only ever had 2 bar neck scrub pythons and I produced my first clutch and I kept all 11 babies, boom, this is my stock going forward, and I never added anything more. Okay, well, that would probably be a problem.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that, especially people who are really into these snakes, got a pair and stopped at that. You know, I mean, but then you would see that with other species, like
basins, maybe. But I mean, then how long, because we aren't getting new basins, it's a closed gene pool, but how many people are actually cranking out basins and how many are getting inbred? Like, because I just don't know. I mean, I don't know how much of Ed Marino's stock are just like all related, or if he's got a bunch of different gene pools. I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I have to imagine that he had a very solid number of founder animals, and obviously he's tracked his lineage as well as anybody. So, but that's just where the Australian stuff is like, it's just a different story, because, you know, I mean, technically speaking, you can still import basins. They just need to be from specific areas, from certain countries. They need to be captive bred before they can leave. Like, okay. It is still possible. Where, I mean, technically it's still possible to get carpet pythons out of Australia, but not really. You know, a zoo would have to import them and breed them and then release them, and it's probably not going to happen.
Probably not going to happen, Ken. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I'm trying to draw parallels, and this is just kind of thinking out loud. Like, you know, like leopard geckos, maybe you could draw a parallel of like morphs, but even still, we're dealing with a much wider founder stock, and same thing with ball pythons. There were, you know, thousands of these things imported. I don't know. It definitely is an interesting conversation, and obviously because there hasn't been a solution kind of figured out quite yet. I don't even know if like, it's interesting to me. I don't know. I always saw carpet pythons as a snake that should have been more popular than they ended up being.
Yeah, it's hard to say why they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say that the thing that has been the most negative for me while keeping carpets has just been the community, honestly. And it's not like the community as a whole. It's a lot of the big breeders have kind of made it not a great landscape for me, I think. Yeah. I mean, here's a good example. I've never talked about carpet pythons on a podcast before. And I've been on a few reptile podcasts.
Let's go.
Yeah, but carpets are like my thing, and so I feel like there's just maybe the pairings that I do doesn't jive with a bunch of the carpet guys out there, and so they're like, he doesn't do this stuff like he's doing more, but I'm also doing pure stuff too, and so maybe I don't have stuff that interests them, which I get that, because I'm pretty sure if you were to ask Ryan Young, like, which snakes of TJ's you like, he's not going to say my carpet pythons. Like, I don't think he would give two shits about any of my carpet python morphs. And so I think that maybe what I'm doing is just not popular in the carpet python community right now. But I think the community is ultimately why the species didn't blow up. It's it's weird. There's a lot of elitist type people, and there's people that are loud voices that are going to say things that, I mean, just for instance, I've heard a lot of carpet python breeders, the big name dudes, say breeding morphs is bullshit, but they breed morphs still. But it's like,
yeah,
I don't get it. And so it just feels weird to be in that community where like the other breeders think that what you do is bullshit, and they are totally open to speak about it on public forums. And that term bullshit, I've just heard it several times, and it's kind of like, man, like you're saying my snake's a bullshit. And so it's kind of weird. Like, if you're a carpet python person and you're listening to other big guys talk or reading their posts online, and they just can't help but say that they don't like the morph thing. And I think it's more so they don't like the idea of the morph breeder, not so much that they don't like the morph snakes. I think it's like they think that if you breed morph carpet pythons, like you're the ball python mindset type dude, you're going to be trying to get rich off of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of kind of weird landscape in the carpet python community with incredibly opinionated people and people that are hardcore. Like there's big dudes in the carpet python community that are hardcore. Like they're big dudes. Like they know what's up. They've been in the game for a long time. They were, and so you are ultimately stepping into their boundaries, and not everyone likes to have people step into their boundaries is what I'm getting. Because I honestly try to reach out, and I thought it would be like a different experience. But instead I get a lot of like, I didn't buy a snake from them. So like even just having a cool conversation can't happen.
Yeah.
Where going back to Ryan Young, never bought a snake from him, but he will always take the time out of his day, but he's not a carpet python guy.
Yeah. He's a floater.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I feel like you can kind of do a case study of the carpet python community and market and the green tree community and market, kind of how they grew kind of over the same period of time. Because when I was first researching both species, I would say that was probably like 2012, I'd say. I would probably have said, just from being a kid, doing research online and going to shows, I would have said carpet pythons were more popular than green tree pythons. Fast forward 12 years, I would say green tree pythons are the third most popular python, and I'm not even sure where carpets fall. And you could probably say at this point, the green tree community is probably bigger than the carpet community.
Oh, 100%. I would say so.
And there are more breeders. There's, I mean, at this point, you know, and on top of that, it hit carpets too, but like the Nido epidemic killed most captive green tree pythons pretty quickly. So for it to bounce back the way that it did is kind of insane if you really think about it. But then after Rico Walder passed and his collection got dispersed, I mean, at this point, you know, Patrick is probably the person producing the most green tree pythons in the U.S. And a lot of the other big name breeders, they maybe have 2 to 5, maybe 7 high-end clutches a year. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because those animals have only gained in value, gained in popularity. They're not difficult to sell, and the community is growing. Where I feel like carpet pythons, obviously it's hard to beat some of the colors that you can get in a green tree python. But as far as the physiology of the animal, I think a carpet python is a lot more marketable than a green tree python.
Yeah.
and they're beautiful. I mean, look, you know, most people, if you show them a very high-end jungle carpet or a diamond python or a gamma line, whatever, like that's just, I mean, you can make that a painting and it would be valuable. Like that's just a beautiful work of art. And I'm not, for anyone who's listening, I'm not trying to shit on carpet pythons. I'm genuinely curious what didn't happen with carpets that did with green trees.
So something that I've noticed, I think the green tree, even to this day, like you hear more and more so-and-so ball python breeder is going to actually step into green trees. Fuck yeah. It's not very much that's like, oh, this large scale breeder is going to start doing carpets now.
Yeah.
And so like every day it seems like the chondro community is growing. And I've seen it grow a lot over the past couple years, honestly. And I think a huge part of that is the personalities that are leading the charge. And I honestly think of guys like Bill Stiegel, Marshall, like MJ, like those dudes talk about those snakes like they shit gold. And that does so much good for the community.
Yeah.
And they're straight up about everything, even though they shit out a lot of slugs and die a lot is what it sounds like, but people are upfront about it. But those are great dudes to be leading the charge on, like, we're the face of this industry at the moment. They do a podcast like for chondros, and you listen to them talk and they're excited and they're they say so much cool shit about keeping green trees. They make it sound so exciting, and that's what's turned a lot of people onto green trees, because a lot of people listening to MJ's podcast were not green tree python people. It's a lot of other people that start hearing about them all the fucking time. They're like, okay, I'll get one, order that, and then they're like, oh shit, these are awesome, I love these. And it's infectious, like the way that they talk about them, and they just make it sound so exciting. Fuck, I got one recently. It's cool to see a sector of the hobby having people. I mean, you do the same thing with scrub pythons. Like the amount of popularity that scrubs have held, and I'd say that, or the scrubs have gained, I'd say you're a good reason for that over the past few years. You're excited. You post amazing photos. When you talk about them, you talk about them in a good light. You make it sound cool, and you can see the passion. I feel like a lot of the loudest voices with carpet pythons don't make it sound as cool as the chondro guys make it sound. They make it just sound cool. You want to be a part of that community. Like, you want to be in with those dudes and they have fun talking with each other, as opposed to you go into a carpet python group and it's not like that. And there's not like a lot of voices that are, I mean, we do have Morelia Python Radio and Eric Burke and Owen. I think those two dudes are great. But they don't seem to have the amount of like reach that the chondro podcasts are getting at the moment. And it seems like maybe just people are, I don't know, more excited about green trees for some reason, even though people are hearing that they're hard as hell to breed. Like, oh, good luck with the eggs, good luck with the babies. Every podcast you listen to about chondros, people are like, be ready to have your fucking heart broken. And people are more so like, they're like, I'm ready, let's do it. With carpet pythons, people are like, I don't know, you're not gonna break my heart, but I don't know if I even care to have you. Like, I don't know, there's just something that's keeping people away. I love the snakes. They've just always been they've always been one of those species I've had. And so, and I feel the most comfortable with them. And it is kind of sad to see that the other communities that I feel like we were like right there with, they've just gone past us. And I think it's the voices at the front of the pack that make it fun, make it seem cool. And I think that the other guys that MJ does his podcast with, and I mean, all the guests that he brings on to talk about chondros, I mean, everyone just sounds like they're having a good time, even when their heart's getting broken and babies are dying. Yeah. They're still like, I love these snakes more than ever. And so it's just like, it looks fun. And I'm glad that that's what's happening with the chondro community. I don't know how, I don't think I'm the best person to be the voice of carpet pythons. I'm not very like a social person, or I don't have the energy like MJ does. Like that guy can fucking podcast every damn day. And
that he can.
Yeah. And so there has to be the right person to come across. We do have Riley is probably, as far as like YouTube, Riley is the face of carpet pythons right now. Yeah. But it's Riley against 15 chondro guys that all have different podcasts and talk. And so it's like,
sure,
you've got a group of dudes leading a charge with chondros, and you've got a bunch of people in carpets that do different stuff with one another and don't really, I feel like, coexist amongst one another too much.
Yeah.
Like most carpet guys, you'll be like, it's like, I've got one other friend that is like, lives close to me that does carpets or something, but it doesn't seem like you have like carpet python groups other than like Eric and Owen. And then you've got like, yeah. So I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion about it and how the hobby has ended up where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you make very good points there. And I think that's been a trend throughout all of the reptile hobby, all of the history of it, of, when people are talking about something, it gets attention. Obviously with that said, Morelia Python Radio has been around for probably 15 years or so now, maybe even longer.
I think 2012 is when it started.
Wow. That's
maybe 2011. I don't know, somewhere around there.
Hats off to them, because that's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of shit that I've learned over the years from that podcast alone has been so invaluable. Like the way that I like built out my whole snake room and how I keep and everything is from things I learned listening to them. And I mean, I listened to every episode, and
those two guys got me through high school.
I know, right?
Every week it was Tuesday morning. I'm like, is it there? Like, fuck yeah, let's go.
At my last job, I used to just listen to it at work all day because I could work with headphones in. And so, yeah, I just spent a lot of time listening to those dudes talk about snakes. And yeah, I've learned a lot from listening to those guys talk. And I'm incredibly, maybe I haven't made it really clear. Like I'm super thankful for those dudes specifically. And Eric and Owen, I've honestly never really talked to Owen before, but I've never had a negative experience with those guys. Those are good dudes in the community that are cool. They're upfront and they're nice. It's been other breeders that have made things less desirable for me, or ripped me off or done whatever. Not those guys. So I don't want anyone to think like, I want to make it clear, like,
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's the case with a lot of different stuff. I mean, scrub pythons were that way for a while. Very, very much guarded, lots of gatekeeping, people that weren't sharing information. I love it. I had one guy tell me my snake was a different locality than what it was, and then a year later, he told me that it was a Jayapura. Was not what he told me the first time, not what it was sold to me as. It's like, well, this is a barneck. Anything, you know they don't come from Jayapura.
Right.
So it's just like, what are you doing? Why? Like what is this high horse you feel like you need to stand on when you were so wrong? And there's evidence that you can find very easily that proves that you're wrong, but you like your high horse better than you like being right.
Yeah.
It's a way to be. It's weird.
It must be rough going through life like that, just in denial about everything.
Some of the best parts about doing this is like having a belief of yours brought into question, learning something new, and then having more success because of it.
Right.
Like that.
The learning opportunities are the best.
Yeah. And it hurts the ego for a second to be like, oh, damn, I've been kind of standing on this for a while, but take a deep breath and be like, well, okay, what would I rather do? Double down on my idea that I now know is wrong, or change and be better at this thing that I care about?
And that's what character is like all about. And that's where like it'll really, if you are wrong and you're like, I was wrong, I've got so much respect for you, and I'm like, it's all good, dude. But if you find out you're wrong and you know you're wrong and you continue to just be like, no, I don't think there's anything I can do to change your mindset or help you. Yeah. And I don't think I'm gonna mesh with you, kind of person. But it speaks a lot of like when you are told you're wrong and you still, or if you're proven wrong, not told you're wrong.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think with scrub pythons, we're lucky that some of these people who were holding that side of the fence are no longer involved. And it gives us all who are still involved the opportunity to change that mindset and change that narrative going forward. Be inclusive of, that's part of why I wanted to start that new scrub python group. I still post in the old scrub python group, but to me, it's like this, you know, we'll start a new place for people who want to learn about these snakes, want to share information, and not feel like they're being looked down upon because they're whatever,
asking a question or
like, yeah. I don't have any scrub pythons, but I want to learn about them. Not like, you fucking loser, how can you not have any scrub? Like, who does that help? Who has that ever helped? Come on,
exactly.
Like, let's be adults about this. And like, who wasn't that guy once?
Yeah,
like I was that guy 7-8 years ago, and I had bad experiences that honestly, if I didn't care so much about the snakes, I might have been like, fuck scrub pythons, I'm just gonna double down on my green trees, you know?
Yeah. I think a lot of people ended up saying fuck scrub pythons because of exactly what you're saying. They're misled and lied to and all this shit and told a certain thing would be the way to do it when it really wasn't. And then a lot of people are like, yeah, these snakes are just impossible to breed.
Yeah. Or like, you know, one person in particular, but then trickle down to a lot of other people labeling these snakes whatever the fuck they wanted to label them that day. And then a bunch of fights breaking out on Facebook about what locality the scrub python is, when the answer is we have no fucking clue and we're not going to, so we shouldn't talk about it.
Right. Yeah, it certainly shouldn't get worked up over it.
You know, even to the point where people like from different continents were fighting with each other about the locality of a snake. It's like
a snake they don't know the real locality of.
Go cook dinner. Take care of your kids. You know, go for a walk.
Yeah.
You know, grow up. This is
go clean your snakes. Get off the computer. Like, I'm sure if there's something to be done in your snake room, don't argue with people on the internet all day.
It's just, oh man. But that, you know, it sounds so petty to us because we're as deep in this as we are. But to a brand new person, that kind of negativity could be enough to completely deter them.
Yeah, especially if someone you look up to treats you like shit, and
like if you're like friends who are into the same thing, you're looking for community, because we don't just keep snakes to keep snakes. We keep snakes to keep snakes and enjoy them with people who we consider friends.
Yeah, and
you know, I've lost interest in snakes that I've had friendships kind of go sideways, and I'm like, man, was I like, do I have these snakes because like I wanted to be a part of something that I thought I was for a while, but now I'm not? Like, you know, it's kind of a weird thing to realize of like, why did I like these snakes? And you know, interest can come and go too. You can try something and it's not for you, But like, I'll find myself not quite so excited about snakes I have that I don't have anyone to talk to about.
Damn.
And not all of them, but definitely some. And I just think it's such an important part of what we do, is that community aspect. And if that community aspect is weak or toxic and negative, there's gonna be a lot of people who don't want to even begin that journey, because they're like, why would I put myself through this?
And I think ultimately that's kind of what they want. They don't want more people coming in. They want the least amount of people in as possible. Just because, I mean,
it's so weird to me. I've never understood that mindset.
It's super weird because it's backwards. Because you ultimately need to sell your snakes to the community, and I don't know. There's just so much. The word competition has been thrown around whenever I've spoken to the other, when I speak to big breeders. I'm just a breeder, not a big breeder. When I speak to the big breeders, they will specifically say, no, I'm not going to tell you. And why would I help you? Because you're competition to me. It's like, I thought we just liked snakes, man. Like, what the hell? And so it's I don't know if there's a lot of talk like that in the chondro world, but you will hear talk like that in the carpet community.
You know what's crazy? There's not even talk like that in the ball python world for the most part. I mean, there are some shady, sketchy characters in ball pythons, but it's such a big industry that there inevitably will be. You don't think these people are helping each other out with breeding, and like they all do it the same way?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think they're getting these ideas from? From each other.
Yeah.
I was involved in ball pythons for a long time. Everybody was forthcoming with information. Where it got tricky was when people would like lie about pets or castrate males before selling them. But that was a minority of people. That wasn't most people. You know, those were the few bad eggs that, you know, that ruined the bunch. Like,
that's disgusting.
Oh, I mean, there's some absolutely atrocious stories, but if you just fixate on that seems like a lot when it's really a small percentage. If the ball python world can exchange information. I mean, look at this channel. MJ's been doing podcasts on here for probably 5 years about ball pythons. You know, that's a lot of information that these people are willingly coming out on this channel and giving out about how they make their living. Like, if the ball python community can do that, I don't know who can't.
Right. And that's why
motivated part of the market.
Yeah, and that's why I liked listening to those guys. Is they share information. And also it seems like they just have they got a good system going, and I don't know, I'm friends with ball python and boa breeders here, and they are really cool dudes, way cooler than any of the big carpet python breeders that I've really met. And we don't keep any of the same snakes really, but I've just met so many cool dudes in the other sectors of the hobby that it makes me it's why I'm not very involved in the carpet python community. I actually spend a lot of time in my local Facebook group, Arizona Reptile Keepers group. We've got heavy hitter ball python breeders. We've got guys that breed boas, diamonds, like weird shit. We've got all kinds of cool guys locally. And so I've kind of been trying to just see what I can do with the people locally, and see if I can maybe get a little bit of carpet community going within the people here. I'm going to be vending like a little small like breeder showcase here next month, and there's like never carpet pythons on any table here in Arizona, so hopefully I can actually put some in some people's hands and whatnot and expand it here, because no one here really keeps carpets. A lot of ball pythons, a lot of boas, but a lot of reptile keepers. Like, we've got guys that have hundreds of clutches of ball pythons every year. We've got probably like 4 guys that do that. Really? Wow. Yeah, like big heavy hitters that are hitting like the big combos, and stuff like that, and go and vend shows and kill it. And
Wow.
so we've got dudes here, but no one in the carpet python community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're fighting the good fight. I'll tell you that.
But
honestly, I will say though, it is admirable that you face so much adversity within that community, and you still care about the animals just the same. You're still going through with your projects. You're still doing everything the way you want to. I feel like there would be a lot of people that would be deterred by some of the experiences you've had.
Yeah, I mean, and it hasn't all been negative.
Sure, for sure.
And I mean, I'm sure you've gone through a bunch of negative shits, and I mean, it seems like this hobby is gonna drag you through some mud to make sure you really want to stick with it. But that's kind of what will make or break you is and that's how you know, I think, when you're getting to like that next level of a keeper, like you get in, you're like, I like snakes. Snakes are cool. I'm gonna make an Instagram. And you start breeding, then you start posting stuff, and your shit builds, and then you hit this level where all of a sudden people start treating you a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And because it's like they see you step into a level where they're like, that person's got my project too. That's just another person that could possibly, when they've got 600 snakes, they might not be able to feed their stock up to breeding size as quickly as someone with maybe just 10 snakes. And so I feel like you get a lot of this pushback of like, hey, I see you're starting to hit this level and be a breeder and you're producing clutches. And I was treated differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's by a small handful of guys, but it's guys that I wanted to be, I guess I kind of wanted to be in their circle. I looked up to them.
Sure.
But I mean, that it happens. And I mean, I love carpet pythons. I just think they're such badass snakes. I always tell myself, like, I'm not going to buy carpet pythons anymore, but I still look for them every day. Like, I love looking for carpets. Like, even though I know I'm not going to buy a carpet, I love looking to see what people got for sale and see cool projects. And it's hard for me not to buy carpet pythons still. But I don't need to. I've literally got almost every morph I want. I've got some like triple het stuff that I'm working, and I've got a bunch of crazy projects, so I don't need any more snakes. But I really, really love carpet pythons, and I've got 80 of them. and so to be someone who's so heavily invested into the species and I feel so disconnected from the community though. But it could be partially my fault. Maybe I haven't, I don't know. Maybe the way I portray myself online, people don't like. I'm kind of quiet online, so I don't know what I would have done other than just posting pictures of my breedings. But yeah, I love these snakes, and I'm gonna keep working with them. Hopefully it doesn't piss off anybody.
No, I hope not. If it does, then I think that's their problem, not yours.
Yeah. I'm not too concerned with it. I've kind of moved past it. I mean, to some of my close friends, they definitely hear about all the little things, and I'll show them screenshots of messages that I've had with people, and they'll
even call that.
Speaking of one of the person that sees almost every interesting screenshot that I get, it's that kid right there. He gets to see most. He's really one of the only local reptile guys I hang out with in person. So Brandon has to hear me rant a lot. Sorry, Brandon. I don't speak a lot online, and then he'll fucking meet up with me, and I'll just fucking talk his ear off for an hour. That's kind of how it goes.
If he had too much of it, I doubt he would have been listening live for so long. So I think you're probably in the clear.
Yeah, he's probably just trying to get more free snakes out of me.
You know?
No, I don't think that's what he's
doing it.
Nah, actually, I owe him a snake. So, Brandon, come over this weekend and you can pick out a Darwin carpet.
Well,
Shit.
Well, man, we're just shy of 3 hours, and I feel like we probably have another 3 hours in the tank here. We haven't even really gotten into any of the like nitty gritty of your projects or anything.
Yeah, that's all right.
But I think we're due for a round 2 sometime, not in the too far future, because I honestly do. I love this conversation.
Yeah, I could keep this going for a while, so let's do another one for sure.
For sure. So I'll wrap it up on what are some of your like visions for how you want to take things in the future? Like where, in the next few years, what are some of the things you want to see evolve in your collection, your breeding, everything that you're doing?
I really want to get some success out of my Apodora. I had an infertile clutch last year, which I was still so stoked to even get that far. But to hatch out some would be really cool. And then I've got some pretty long-term carpet projects that are like my main focus with carpets right now. So I'm like making a lot of double het, triple het stuff that have like a couple incomplete dominant genes sprinkled in, trying to just get the combinations that I feel like have been easy to hit, but no one's really actually worked towards it because not a lot of people are working like you have to cross and make hybrids to make a lot of these triple recessive carpet morphs. Yeah. And so there's not a lot of people that are doing that. And so this year I hatched out a clutch of triple het snow. Well, they're het snow, 50% posset granite zebras. Okay. So they're double het, 100% double het snow, 50% het granite or posset granite. And then there's zebras. And then I got another clutch that are going to be, instead of zebras, are going to be caramels. Okay. For the incomplete dominant. And so ultimately going to be raising up and trying to produce visual triple recessive carpet stuff like snow granites with different incomplete dominants sprinkled in, most likely zebra and caramel and hypo. Okay. And then I really want to actually get my boa projects going too. I've got some cool boa morphs, and then I also just want to get my Jamaican boas up to size. I love that species. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of breeding. There's a lot of breeding snakes. Holding a lot of stuff back is probably going to be what I'm doing for a while. Okay. I'm not really too pressed to sell any snakes, so I've honestly held back almost every clutch for the past 3 years. Oh, wow. Other than stuff I've like just given to friends. But I just look at things that are really long term, and carpets take a long time to change color. So even the stuff I hatched out in 2022, I'm just now deciding what my holdbacks are going to be and whatnot. So I'm cool with holding on to snakes for 2-3 years before I move them. Sure. So, yeah, just building up the army and trying to keep it going steady. Maybe have to get another building going here pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of breeding snakes and keeping the thing rolling.
Hell yeah. Well, if anyone who is watching or listening wants to check out what you have going on, hit you up about available animals, where can anyone find you online?
I'm pretty much only actually active on Instagram under chambers.serpents. I don't really use Facebook a whole lot. I kind of just like scroll through the groups, but I'm not really active on there. And a lot of like my band pages take priority in the messenger thing, so I never get messages from my reptile page. I never see them. I don't get notifications for it, so I end up missing almost any message that goes to my Facebook reptile page.
All right. Yeah. So Instagram's the way then.
Yeah, just hit me up on Instagram. It's probably the only way.
All right. Hell yeah. Well, dude, thank you again so much for your time tonight. This was awesome. This is such a great conversation, and I think a really important one that a lot of people will benefit from. So yeah, this was really an awesome time. I appreciate it very much.
Hell yeah. Thank you a lot for having me. I know we've talked like quite a bit just through like messages over the years, but to finally get to sit down and hash some stuff out has been really awesome. So thanks for having me. Thanks for thinking of me when it came to doing this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you too, man. I'm going to throw you backstage for a minute if you want to stick around and close the show out. But again, thank you so much. This was awesome, man. I really appreciate it.
All right. Hell yeah. Thanks, man.
All right. All right, guys, there it is, episode 12. We did it. This might end up being the longest episode, maybe second to Ryan Young by a couple of minutes, unless I do a little bit of stalling right now. So thank you everybody who was tuning in live here on YouTube, or also thanks to everybody who was watching after the fact or checking us out on all of the streaming services. If you like this episode or interested in more of this content, you can subscribe here to the Trap Talk Reptile Network on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, wherever you get your podcast from. Leave a 5-star review, leave a comment. Everything helps us, and we appreciate it all. For me, you can find me on Instagram at Scrub Shepherd or just Stephen Kush on Facebook. I do my best to respond to all messages I get on both platforms. So if you are interested in anything that I have going on, shoot me a message. For anybody who is interested in the Scrub Talk tonight, check out the Somalia group on Facebook. That is the new Scrub Python and Bolin's Python group that we were mentioning during the show. It's a place for all people who have interest in these animals, no matter the experience level, whether or not you're a keeper. Anyone who loves these animals or has an interest is welcome, and everything is encouraged. So thank you again, everybody who tuned in tonight, and we will see you back here next week.